Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 369. Freddie E. Williams II returns to the show. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, drnorge, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim, the sensei of the whatnot Segulent, and the Duke of You-Know. On this episode, we are joined by a longtime friend of the show, Freddie E. Williams II, as we talk about his most recent work on the Movement. We also talk about a recent Legends of the Dark Knight story that he did, and his work on Dark Horse Presents issues 23, 24, 25, and share some listener questions for him as well. He's always a terrific guest, so we're glad to have him back on the show. We are proud members of the Comics Podcast Network and the League of Comic Book Podcasts. Sponsoring us this episode is DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Over at DCBService.com, you can pick up The Movement, issue number 8. Regularly $2.99, 40% off, only $1.79. Vengeance, Moth, and Burden are left alone to fight the Graveyard faction. Only they and Tremor can prevent a disaster beneath Coral City. And this is by Gail Simone, Freddie E. Williams II. The whole team is absolutely incredible. And hopefully this episode, if you're not already a reader, will tell you why you should be. Over at InStockTrades.com, this is your chance to pick up Dark Horse Presents number 23, 24, and 25. These are $7.99 an issue because it's a really great anthology series. But over at InStockTrades.com, you can pick them up for only $4.39. That's 45% off. InStockTrades.com is a wonderful source for collected editions and hardcovers, as well as some back issues. So definitely check out InStockTrades.com. Remember, orders of $50 or more give you free shipping. James, what kind of a podcast are we?
Raging Bullets is a spoiler podcast. We go in-depth into plotline, story twists, and whatnot of the comics we're discussing on the show. So, if you haven't read the books, you may want to come back later so you can better enjoy the show.
Now I can get out of here!
Joining us is once again longtime friend of the show, Freddie E. Williams II. Freddie, welcome back to Raging Bullets.
Hey guys, thanks for having me back on. It's been too long.
Yeah, it has. We like talking to you. You're a fun guy.
Just a moment ago, I was thinking the last time that we had recorded together, and it was nearly a year ago, if I'm not mistaken. Isn't that right? It was like maybe 10 months ago or something.
Was that one? Because I know we talked over the summer, and then my life got a little complicated, and we were going to talk about the Movement then. You're right. I think it was it back with Green Arrow?
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure that was it.
But now we're back talking to you about the Movement. And yeah. I'm really anxious to talk to you about this series because I've been digging it. We're 5 issues in with issue 6 coming out this week. And it's a very unique and interesting cast of characters. Can you tell us a little bit of background, like how you got involved in the Movement? And one of our listeners had a really good question. It's probably a good starting point. When you get on a series like the Movement, what is your involvement in the creation of the look of the character and the design of the book in general? Because it's definitely got a style that's unique to it. So can you tell us a little bit about how the Movement came about?
Right after Green Arrow stopped for me, there was a period of about a month or so where DC had acted like they might have something for me, but it wasn't definitive what it was going to be. But I guess during that time was when Gail Simone was talking to them about the Movement. I know in retrospect, it's not often that decisions series get greenlit during the holiday season, just because there's a lot of people on vacation and just it's hard to get everyone together to make a decision. So in any case, during that time, Gail was putting together a pitch and a series of backgrounds on the whole team of the Movement. So then they approached me maybe really early January. At first they were going to have somebody else do some character designs, and that was cool because I had a whole bunch of other work that during the month or so that I didn't have work from DC I had agreed to. So at first I thought somebody else was going to be designing the characters and I would just do a slight kind of facelift to them. I guess that guy got busy, and then so they forwarded me all the information, and Gail had gone all out. I mean, I have never worked with her in this capacity. I did some 3D model stuff for her on back on Birds of Prey stuff. I think it's called the Oracle So whatever her headquarters, I was going to say hideout, but that's not it. It kind of looks like the Space Needle. I don't know if this makes sense or if you know.
No, absolutely. It was was that called the clock or watchtower?
Wasn't it the Watchtower?
I'm not really for sure. I thought the Watchtower was the Justice League thing, but whatever it is. I mean, like a little while ago, that was the only time that I had worked with Gail, was that my wife and I, Kiki and I, had done this 3D model for Gail, for the artist and stuff. We just established the headquarters. And the point that I'm making is that I had worked with her just in that capacity, and I had wanted to work with her for a while, but I hadn't worked with her on a project where she was writing it. And I was really, and still am really impressed with, how she put together these characters' histories, these characters that she's making from whole cloth, but they feel very fully formed. So she had these bios that were at least 2 or 3 paragraphs long about the characters and their backgrounds, and they felt very fully formed. So I went off of that, and then aside from that, me and Joey Cavalieri and Gail all had a few email discussions where we discussed like the overall feel of the book. Like, it was basically, from my perception, it's like Runaways plus Punisher. Like, if you took both of those aren't like what they told me to do, but that's just where my sort of headspace is. So like the younger characters and stuff, but trying to go grittier and whatever. So anyway, I did like 3 or 4 different passes of character designs. Somewhat like Catharsis was probably the one that had the most revision with her, and it was because she was a previously established character in the DC universe. Like, she had appeared in a couple of other books, and I think they didn't want her to feel like a Hawk girl. They wanted her to feel like her own character. So there's a lot of different types of wings that you can go with, but we ended up going with these clearly mechanical wings, and I don't know, we just kept going back and forth. And then when I got to color, that was a nightmare for me, because I'm not real good with color theory stuff. So once I had the black and whites down, I just assumed, cool, somebody else will add color to it. But they wanted to get a feeling for color as well. I think basically just to get a better feel of the book and to show like the higher ups at editorial and just stuff like that. So on color stuff, we went back and forth, and I got a lot of input from my wife Kiki, because she has a really good eye for that sort of stuff. Anyway, that was basically the process. That all happened very early in January, and it was very collaborative, and it continues to be very collaborative. Like, currently we'll be wrapping up in the next couple of days issue 8. Gail is really great to work with, and the characters it feels like very much like an independent book, so it feels very much like I don't actually own a part of them, like money, like contractually, but it feels like I have a big piece of them, so to speak, because both Gail and I have put a lot of work into them.
When you have such a background with the characters, like you put in more time on the front end, the design and all that, does that for you as a creator, when you get to actually working on the book, do you have more of an emotional investment in the characters? Because, I mean, you've done, obviously at this point, through every book that you've worked on, you've had involvement in design of characters that are involved in the book. But does that drive a difference in emotional investment, the amount of time spent, or is it as you get to work and get to know the characters you get that? How does that work for you?
It does, but it's difficult to define. It feels more like I know the characters, like I can hear their voices more in my head, so to speak. Not in a creepy, psychotic sort of way, but, or at least not that I would admit to. No, but I guess I felt like this kind of with whenever I was drawing Robin for a couple of years, but it didn't feel like that at the beginning. It felt like that at the end, because I'd been drawing him for so long and had slowly evolved his look and stuff and felt like I got to know him, like he became an extension of me in some ways. It's difficult to define, but yeah, this one was like with the movement, with the designs and stuff, it was like that from a much earlier time period on. I think Gail is definitely to be credited for that, because of how well she had defined the characters even before I got them, but then being open to my suggestions and my ideas and stuff like that too. Just recently, like at the New York Con, so in October, I was very pleasantly surprised by seeing, I think it was 5 different cosplayers dressed as different characters, maybe it was 4 different people dressed as characters from the movement. And we got some photos together and stuff, and it was surreal to see my imaginary characters in front of me in real life. It was a strange moment. And several of the photos that we have together of that, looking back at it, there's times that I just look really happy because I was, and then there's other times I look kind of like slightly confused or something, and and it's not in a bad way. It was just that's the only time that's really happened to me. Like in San Diego, I met somebody who had cosplayed as Vengeance Moth, and then I had seen pictures of somebody who had cosplayed as Virtue. And then I met the same person who had cosplayed as Virtue. She was there in New York. Anyway, that's very fresh in my mind because it was a really cool experience.
That's awesome. Has anybody done Mouse? Mouse is my favorite character.
No, I don't think so. The guy who cosplayed Burden said that he had just cut his hair short, or else he might have been able to go as Mouse. But I mean, I didn't say this, but I guess it would be, you could go with a wig or something like that. I don't know, but he makes a great Burden, so maybe he should just stick with that and let somebody else eventually become Mouse. But the gal who cosplayed as Vengeance Moth had a small, like a little doll of Mouse that she was carrying around in her backpack. I thought that was cute. So that's the closest so far to Mouse, is the little doll.
I like that the series brought in Rainmaker too, from Gen 13. I just liked seeing that character brought in, because it's a character we haven't seen since, because Wildstorm has been merged with the DC universe, so it's nice to see some of those characters brought in and they add something to it. But I loved the unique characters, and Catharsis came from Batgirl as part of the Disgrace, which was great to see that character. But I love, to me, you mentioned an independent series, I love that feel. Because I'm always looking for, when you get a new series and you have an opportunity to have a new team, I want it to feel different than the other books that I'm reading. That to me is the draw. I don't want it to feel like it's trying to be Justice League light, if that makes sense. It just kind of gets, then all of a sudden it just feels like it's not delivering something fresh to me or something new that makes me get attached. This is covering a concept and an idea that I think works, because if you talk about those big teams like Justice League, they're operating and dealing with major cosmic and world issues. These are the characters that are really focusing on what's happening on the street level. The people who are actually living in the towns and dealing with the ramifications of choices and of politics, and they're really speaking for the voiceless masses. I love that concept, because that's where you get really into, even within this team, you get some ideologies that are coming out where they seem to be agreeing at first, but then you can see people starting to question within the team. Hey, are we right in what we're doing? Are we wrong in what we're doing? Where is our line, and how do we decide that? And part of that also comes from being teenagers. I've loved that feel of the book, because there's a realism to this that I think really grabs me, because when you bring the fantastic in, and then the characters who are viewing it are very realistic in their approach, you all of a sudden start having these head scratch emotions. You're like, oh, wait a minute. There's so many times I reread the series this past week because I wanted it fresh in my head. And this was about my fourth read-through of the series, because when it first came out, I did the first few issues. I did, the first three, I did another read-through again just for fun. And then, I did, kind of my art read-through and all that stuff that I always do. But I read it from 1 through 5, and I can't encourage people enough to do that with the series. It's a lot of fun to just kind of go through and go on the journey with the characters, because I feel like by issue 5, we've really got a strong foundation of who they are. And I think that's really important in an initial run of a series where they're new characters. I feel like I've got an emotional investment now in these people. I want to see where they're going. I want to see what the movement means for them. I want to see how they grow as a team, because with them being so young and so new into the world, that's something that I really want to see from them, is where they go from here.
Yeah, and I mean, with the sort of richness of the world, of the kind of, whether it's supernatural or not, I don't know, something that's atypical or whatever mixed with reality, that's very much, and I'm attempting to augment that or supplement that with the way that I'm drawing backgrounds and trying to make things more immersive. But most of that is done by Gail and how, her characterization. And I do think that the book probably benefits from being read in a larger chunk, because it's a team book, so it's better to get a bigger dosage of the of the team, but I think that Gale is good at writing excitement that is interrupted, but it doesn't stop the flow of things, but you get to know the characters. It's a difficult thing for me to verbalize, and the first arc is like 8 issues long. This is the 8th issue that I'm going to be wrapping up this week, is the last of that first arc. So it's wrapping up, or it's coming to a close as far as that story arc pretty soon. Yeah, it's building to some fun stuff. And one of the other things I like about the characters is that there's a mix of power levels that, if it was a Justice League book, I guess they have like the larger Justice League or the older Justice League, where they would have kind of like auxiliary members that weren't the heavy hitters of the team or something, like if even in the Justice League Unlimited cartoon or something, where they'd have different power levels. Generally, whenever you think of the Justice League, you think of the big heavy hitters, and so there's only certain type of threats that it would be weird if they were dealing with police corruption or something, but weird because it would seem like a waste of their power level or something. With the movement, I think that there's no effort on Gale's part to make it fit in to a previous mold or something. Instead, she's able to mix characters that are very powerful with characters that essentially, or haven't really shown much of their power yet, even if they are powerful. It's a nice mix of elements that I think also feels more, in quotes, real. If you did have a team of sort of odds and ends or ragtag team, they wouldn't all be on the same power level necessarily. You have to have something bigger than that to kind of organize the power level. But here it's a group of people from all different walks of life.
I like that. Oh, good, Jim.
It's that mix you kind of mentioned, that's something that really has drawn me into this. And especially not just the characterization and who they are, but the looks and the feels, because that's something I've always loved, how you draw the physical action. But it's just that raw facial emotions. That's always, for me, that's the Freddie Williams art for me. That's like, yeah, because you get these, within a span of a couple pages, you're seeing fear, guilt, rage, anger, all these different things, and it's all told in the eyes. It's all told in those really cool zoomed in close-ups of the people's faces, especially of the 2 police officers on trial. And it was just something that, just the emotional expression of these regular everyday people. Then you get these crazy, cool characters with these teenage meta powers and just their own little kind of quirks to them, but you still see that same humanity and that same type of emotional spectrum. And that's something that I always, just enjoy. And it's that meshing of the story being told and the physical art coming together. So this is just an absolutely wonderful team between the 2 of you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Yeah, Gale writes a lot of opportunities for me to try to act, in quotes, act through the characters. So a good amount of range and stuff. Also, her characterization, like with the 2 police officers, which is one's last name is Witt and the other one is Pena, Pena, I think. But she has not made them universally bad, even though they're bad cops basically. But they're not 100% villains. They're not twirling their mustaches, and I like that Gale has taken the time or the space in the comic to show some humanity to basically what are the bad guys in the story,
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really cool.
Wit. Yeah, especially with Wit, because I think Sean and I are about to say the exact same thing, because you see, just in that one panel where while they're on trial, talking about their accommodations. And when they're talking about Officer Witt, he's got 4 commendations of bravery. And the last one, he goes, I helped the kid. And you can kind of see that he's not trying to, did all this wonderful stuff. He was being very humble about it. He went into a burning car and pulled a kid out of, pull the baby out of a car. And you go for that one panel where there's a little bit of humility. Then you see the other panel where he's actually pulling the kid out, the fear in his eyes, and just oh crud, I got to do this. That was just a really cool couple panels, because then immediately he goes back to rage and anger, because he's like, hey, you don't know what it's like to be a cop, doll face. You don't know what we go through. And I just love just that whole emotional spectrum, and the story being told, but also, as I said, the visual side of it.
Do you think Whit was always like that, or do you think like he at some point in time developed a sense of entitlement because of everything he'd been through? Because like when I looked at that sequence with the girl, I loved the visual of that because it's this 4-year-old girl in the burning. You just see the one panel, but you see the genuine, like there was an emotion on his face of an intensity of a desperation to get to the girl to save her. And in that moment, I'm kind of like, okay, I love that this isn't the guy's whole story. Like since the beginning, he's clearly been a bad guy to me. Like he did not have any kind of, his partner was the one I was kind of like, okay, this is a guy who was there. He's probably apologized for him many times before. It's you get that kind of relationship, and I think we all know people like that. Where you've got you don't know the side of him that I know, but I get where you're coming from. I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. I so totally related to that sequence because of it. But Whit totally felt like a bad guy in that moment. And this is a testament again to what you guys are doing with this book. In that one sequence, I'm like, okay, I would read like a Whit miniseries just because I want to know what his what led him to be where he's at now. Was this always the way he was? Or I'm just interested in
I think that my understanding and part of this is, or probably a big chunk of it is informed by, what Gail wrote and what she's told me or whatever through email and in the scripts and that sort of thing, is that Whit has been big for his age. Basically, he was a bully and got his way most of the time when he was growing up. And he was also a boxer. He also could fight very well. So I think that probably dictates or shows most of his personality, was that he likes to be in control. That's probably one of the things that drew him to become a police officer. But then you get the stuff, the commendations for bravery and that sort of thing. I think the crooked cop stuff is easier to understand because it's easy to paint him with the brush of he's been a bully his whole life. He likes the feeling of power. He just kept pushing to see what he could get away with. So he started, going more and more crooked, his slide down the gradation until he was on the bad side. But yeah, there was the bravery part is somewhere in there, or the caring, because I don't know the whole story about him rescuing the kid or whatever, but I'm sure that there would be a way to, that he doesn't have to put himself in that much of harm's way and then could still play it off that he tried. Well, I tried, oh, sorry. she died, but anyway, yeah, and on a side note, I feel like the biggest contribution I contributed to the character of Whit was the first issue of the movement where Catharsis has a fight with Whit. She knocks all of his front teeth out, and that was not written in the script, but they did say that they wanted this to feel like a really knockdown, a gritty fight where and I could feel free to try to make it brutal. And what better way? One of the worst results of getting punched in the face to me would be having all your teeth knocked out, and then so on the next issue, because Gail had already written like the first 2 issues by she had the second issue already written, but I emailed her and I was like, I wasn't sure, I didn't know that he was going to wind up in the jail cell and stuff because I only had access to the first issue, because it would be easy for me to think, oh, it's second issue comes around, it's going to be 2 months later and he's fine, but instead it's like basically there's no lag in time, and so I was drawing, or I was either inking. There was some point where I was working on that fight scene, and I got the idea to make sure that they're okay with me really messing him up, and keeping him messed up for the foreseeable future to try to make it feel realistic how beat up he got. And they said, oh yeah, feel free, go for it. So from there on out, he's got, his face is all messed up. I felt like they gave me license to really deform him because he'd have a tremendous amount of swelling and bruising because he didn't have, he had no chance to clean himself up. He would look horrific. As the time goes on, he does have an opportunity to clean himself up and blah, blah, blah. So, but he still has his teeth missing. His eyes they aren't black eyes anymore. They aren't puffy, but he's still got them teeth. He's still got the jack-o'-lantern face or whatever.
See, I like that, though, because that consistency to me, that adds a continuity to the book. That's the kind of continuity that I like in comics. It's this feeling like, because this is serialized storytelling. So I want to feel like what happened in the first issue carries on into, unless, like you said, 2 months later, we're seeing this character again. Well, okay. There's a time passage where it's possible this guy's healed up. Maybe he got some teeth work, dental work done, things like that. We haven't had that in this. I like that, because that, to me, keeps me in to the intensity of what happened in the beginning. It keeps me into the emotion that not just Whit's having, but all of the cast that is involved in this sequence, because it's been a big part of the initial run of the series, this event, because it's really them stepping up and saying, just because you're in a position of authority does not give you the right to take advantage. Just because you've done these great things, and he's gotten accommodations and he deserves them, that doesn't entitle you to take advantage. Yeah. And I really like that, because it's a major point of the series of why there is a movement. These two characters, being Whit and his partner, Pena, are like really the two characters that set us off on that initial path. It leads to much bigger things. But wow, I really liked that continuity.
Cool. Good.
With Pena, I want to say one more thing about Pena, because I love that he's the one that's apologizing. And really, he was the only, out of the two of them, he was telling Whit in the first issue, dude, like, these just seem like nice kids. Let's just let them go. So I don't know what he was exactly apologizing for.
More than anything, I think I think he's probably used to apologizing, like you said. But aside from that, I don't think, what I picture in my mind is when Whit was basically asking to see in the first issue, the whole, a lot of the controversy that started with this, that all of the movement, the masked anonymous movement individuals who, were recording it, the event that they captured was that there was a couple of young people in an alleyway. They were probably there to buy or sell drugs or something. So even they weren't lily white in their position. So Whit and Pena go to bust them or something, and Whit acts like he will, or he flat out says that he'll let them go if the girl shows off her breasts. And he's starting to grope for her and stuff, and then suddenly he realizes that there's somebody down the alleyway that has been recording this, and when they pursue that person, because of course that's not something you want as a crooked cop. You don't want that stuff being recorded and shown to anyone. So they race that, or try to chase that person, and they find out that they're surrounded by these masked people, and a whole bunch of them got it on camera. I think Pena it doesn't strike me, or in my opinion, he wouldn't have been completely objecting to the way that Whit was acting, meaning he would not have tried to stop Whit from seeing the young woman without her shirt on. He wouldn't have tried to say, "Oh, it's going too far, buddy," or, whatever it is. Even if he didn't instigate it, he probably would have been okay with the power trip of it, So once he gets busted and they get put on trial and stuff, I think it's like a real wake-up call. Like, he's like, we're caught. There's no defending this. I realize now how dumb and abusive that was. I'm sorry. It's best just to own up to it or something.
Because he even has those moments, where he talks about how you go out to try to help people, you try to protect them, and they hate your guts. They point at you, they call you names. Kids call you pigs. Kids. Just talking, and I love just that realization from him as well, because he's the good guy in this. He's the guy who was along for the ride, and you could look at and say, "Oh, he really didn't do anything wrong." Even he can understand what it went through and what they go through. And it's one of those things where you can't justify what they did, because they were in the wrong, definitely solid in the wrong, but there's that understanding, like, this is why we did, this is what we have to deal with every day. We're here to help people, and nobody likes us. We're not the heroes and the people that everyone cheer and they thank you for doing your service. It's a tough job being a cop anywhere, and I liked seeing just that duality and just that notion of, this is what we go through. It's wrong. We're wrong, but this is it's kind of a trying to justify what they're doing, but not coming out saying, "Hey, we can do this because we have this negative stuff that happens to us." Yeah,
I think more than anything, I would agree with what you're saying, but I think it doesn't try to explain their specific negative or bad action, but it's more like it's trying to justify their disenchantment with being an authority figure. And I know from experience, like, I've never had a bad circumstance with the police ever, but I have, family and friends whom they like despise police officers and the idea of cops, and they have nothing positive to say about them. If we were to be in a conversation about police misconduct, they assume that that's all police officers. Or if we talk about the positives of a police officer, then they assume that that's the one good guy, or that he's actually he just happened to do one nice thing that was publicized to make up for all the negative stuff that was going on in the department or something. And there is real change in the perception of authority figures, sometimes for right and sometimes it's too big, it's overreactionary. And specifically with police officers, I think that's true. Like, we were just watching like earlier today a couple episodes of Beyond Scared Straight. I don't know if you watch that. And these young kids are this isn't every typical teenager, but I think it's an exaggeration of how more and more teenagers are feeling about authority figures in general, which is there's a smaller amount of leverage that authority figures, including parents, but not just parents, can leverage over children, and that seems to be empowering some children to act out because they have less to fear from ramifications or something. And I'm not endorsing this specifically, but there was a point where even like a next door neighbor might, if you were a kid and you were getting mouthy or something, that the next door neighbor might have the permission to snatch you up by the scruff of your neck or grab your ear, like in the old movies, and take you over next door, and the kid would genuinely fear that their parent would now know about, oh no, they know that I mouthed off to the next door neighbor or something. And that seems to be less and less. Now, I'm not saying that some next door neighbor should be able to manhandle your children, but I'm pretty sure you know what I'm talking about. There's less accountability. Or, I'm sorry, there seems, whatever the cause is, I don't even have kids, so I can't talk from personal experience or whatever, but it seems like there's less potential for authority figures to have leverage points over youth. And that breeds more bold negative actions by some teens, and then that breeds resentment in the authority figures, and it becomes almost an upside down paradigm where in some cases the teenager has more power in the situation than the authority figure. It's just a weird situation. And I'm really going off on a tangent, but the point of all of that was I feel like it's the relevant topics that we're not trying to write a dissertation about it. We're not attempting to give an answer. Those are all factors in this, that we have all these different, not influences, all these different points of view that are juxtaposed against one another.
It is a big part of the book, though, the viewpoint on ethics and authority and even just citizenship, because in many ways the movement and what they're doing, they're creating their own authority in the movement, but it seems like they haven't fully defined it yet. It's a stand against their objections to things that the authority has thrust on them. But that's the part that I'm looking forward to seeing grow in the series is, how does the movement, as they keep moving forward, develop their stand in a way that, because you see it with Mears. I think Mears is our linchpin in this whole thing, as far as the one to kind of look at and go, here's a guy who's in a position of authority, who's willing to listen. He's realizing there's extreme behavior going on here, all around him. He's dealing within his police force with wit. He sees a lot of people that are like that. That's there, and there's a point to what the movement's saying. But on the other extreme, he's taking a look at what the movement's doing, and he's saying, you can't do this.
Yeah.
and I'm loving him as kind of, that's the realism of this as well. He's listening. He's trying to make points to her and say, hey, by the way, also, you're a kid, and you're bringing down on yourself some real danger. And my job is to protect everyone, the people that you're kind of crossing some lines with, but also you, and looking at you and saying, hey, there's assassins, there's supervillains that are coming to your area right now to take you out. And I don't think you are trained or are ready for what's coming down your pipeline for you. I'm telling you this because I, joined up for this. I became this guy that I am because my goal was to protect others. So he's like trying to stay within his own ethical boundaries, recognizing that he's maybe turned a blind eye from time to time and things like that. But it's clear that he's kind of like my good guy figure in this one. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that I really love about a character like him being in there, because you get into some deep philosophical conversations in this book. And with him and Virtue in particular, I love that whole sequence in this issue.
Yeah, and he's not... There was a concern early on that readers would get the feeling that he was a Jim Gordon surrogate or a Jim Gordon duplicate or something, clone. And I think Gale's done a good job of giving him his own voice, like he's clearly not Jim Gordon. Yeah, his concerns are legitimate ones from his perception. I'm not sure exactly how old Virtue is, but I think I read she was supposed to be 17 or something like that. But it was, of course, months and months ago. And so the point I'm making, though, is there's not many 17-year-olds who, even if they're incredibly headstrong and very intelligent, they're not prepared to deal with the kind of stuff that Virtue is taking on, generally speaking. And that's his concern. It's very fatherly. The law is, of course, involved, and of course his own police officers are involved. But he has genuine concern for, and I like that. There's a scene in what issue is it? It's got to be issue 5, where they're in the malt shop.
Yeah.
And you get that feeling that he's there in a different capacity. He's there to talk to her, in some ways as a peer, in some ways as a as police officer, but there's a lot of fatherly overtones, which I think it's good.
I like the way she rides emotion, like that part of her power set, and seeing how she went from initially being very angry with him because he represents this authority that she's so against, but then she starts to learn about the man, not the symbol that he is. Because he starts off, I think, in her eyes as a symbol of the authority. And then when she gets to learn about him as a person, and I think that's what's cool about these characters, because I think in a reverse, for him, she was a symbol of the movement, but now he's getting to know her as a person. So while he's still trying to do his job and she's still trying to do her thing, and that does put them at odds, there's moments like that at the malt shop where you see like her taking the napkin and wiping off his cheek and mustache because he got some of the malt on himself when he was dunking the donut. Little moments like that where you see that kind of thing, because she obviously discovered his wife's infidelity as well.
Talk about awkward.
I like that, though, that there's this person that, like, she's recognized the humanity of him, that his life's not perfect, that everything that the movement represents about trying to protect people who've been maybe disenfranchised or hurt by authority, she can look at this guy and kind of go, but what about him? What about what he's going through? Maybe I don't know the whole story. And that's what I really love about the book. It's a very complex look at these issues. It's not painting one side or the other always as being your heroic side. It makes you, as the reader, really think through both sides that are being presented. I think particularly through Virtue and Mears. I think early on, those are two like kind of latch-on characters to kind of see two different viewpoints when there's actually a lot more in the book. But there's something about those two latching on in the beginning. I really needed those, and I welcomed them as being characters I can latch on to at first.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, they're good at that because they're both. It's easy to, and they're likable. Like, so it's easier to latch on to them than some of the more divisive individuals on either side.
I also like that their conversation doesn't end clean with like them like high-fiving or being best friends or anything like that. I mean, the division between them is still very much present, but yet you feel like there's a respect there, even though you clearly know that they're coming at it from a different philosophical viewpoint. And I liked that. I thought that was cool.
But now that you mentioned it, it would have been cooler if they had high-fived and they jumped up in the air and the 80s freeze frame thing happened.
Or slap donuts or whatever, you know. It's like
I don't know about you all, but I want to actually try taking those donuts and dunking it in a milkshake. I wonder what that actually would taste like.
I bet it would be really good the first couple of bites, and then it would give you a sugar headache. That's how it would be, I think. That's how I'm assuming it would be, at least.
we should record an episode, Jim, where we review an issue of the movement while doing that. We'll give status updates. Why are you doing
Hey, I bet you get the right combo of...
that's what I was going to say, to try the different combinations.
I think a peanut butter shake and a chocolate donut.
Ooh.
Yeah.
When we're leaving Calvin's Hot Donuts, and we get back in the car, I didn't realize in the opening sequence of this event that it was the guy that had been with his wife. And he goes to try. I love the apologies in this, where you get there's so many awkward apologies, which are just great, because I think that's a real life moment. When things happen that are touchy, whatever they are, and you hit a point where you're like, okay, I gotta try to man up here and say something to try and acknowledge the fact that, I've done some wrong here. And he's trying, sir, I'd like to explain about me and your wife. He wants no part of Officer Yee. But the reason why that sequence is so great, and Jim, you mentioned this a little bit earlier, to me, one of the things I always enjoy about a book that you're on, and it's true of Gail's writing as well, and I think it's one of the reasons why I'm really liking you two working together so well, because you guys have similarities in your sensibilities and how you tell stories. It's about emotion. This sequence is a very emotional sequence. It's very realistic, and that realism in comics for me, there's that fantastic element that draws us all to comics. I talked about that earlier. But to me, if you don't feel like these characters are real, if they don't pull you into the story to the point where you're like, I'm believing in them, there's an attachment to them, there's something about them that makes me feel like they're living, breathing, real people. These sequences where you see the facial emotions, they have that awkward conversation about how'd it go, highly caloric, and then you see that he's clearly trying to determine who this girl is, working through her backstory, and he goes into that moment. There's so many emotions that are going on there, from that initial awkwardness to an introspection about figuring out the mystery and solving that, to him just taking 2 seconds to have his coffee and think through all this, to Yee's awkward pulling out of the driveway. It was great. I love those emotional moments because there was a realism. There was business going on there. Then there was the natural awkwardness that you would expect from two people who clearly shouldn't be in a car together.
Yeah, and Gail is really good at... I'm hoping that I'm making good on the execution part, but she's really good at setting up scenarios like that. So it's one of the reasons that I've wanted to work with her for years, and why I'm excited to have gotten the chance to do it, for sure.
Do you have a favorite character as an artist? Is there one that you really like to draw? Or is it not that simple? Is it there's a complication of a lot of them? I don't know how that works for you when you're on a team book or on a series. Are there characters that become your favorite to draw for some particular reason?
Yeah, and it kind of it alternates and stuff as well. But for the most part, if there was one specific character that's my favorite to draw, or that I'm most interested in currently, it'd be Catharsis. And part of that is because I like the stoutness of her, and it's a challenge to try to portray her ethnicity and stuff, because it's always a difficult thing to do without making it a caricature, to make it look naturalistic and that sort of thing. And I just like her, and one of the written things that Gail had was that she's Conan the Barbarian type, and I think that fits very well with how she's been written, and I enjoy that kind of crassness about her. And she was the hardest to design, so actually I had thought she would be the most pain in the ass, the most difficult, the most to get right, or to draw over and over, because she's got a lot of stuff on her. She's got all these clips and a harness and different textures, like this shiny leather, next to the denim on her jeans, and then her turtleneck thing underneath it, whatever. It's fun to do that diversity anyway. There's times that it's like, geez, I got all this stuff to draw again. But for the most part, though, it's fun because there's the variety. Aside from that, I think Mirrors is fun, and part of it is because I'm drawing inspiration. Whether you can see it or not, you probably can't because I'm not real good at drawing caricatures, but drawing some inspiration from Morgan Freeman. I like Morgan Freeman as an actor, and I love the shape of his face and his features and stuff. He's got a very interesting face, so Mirrors is inspired a little bit by him.
One of the things that I really like about this book in particular, it feels very cinematic. It has the right beats as far as being like a screenplay or being like a television series. The episodes feel very episodic. They continue on. They're like my favorite programs that I like to tune into right now, where I want to find out what happens to the characters next. So when you're saying that you're drawing inspiration from actors like Morgan Freeman, I get that vibe. What I was thinking is that he's a character actor. I mean, that's what Mirrors is on the screen. So you're pulling from him makes sense to me, because that's the kind of delivery we're getting from Mirrors as a character. He's one of those that needs to be a focal point, and in a movie, you would put a Morgan Freeman as this guy for just that reason. So it's working really, your inspiration is working really well in the delivery of Mirrors, because he's a pivotal character for me because of that. And you would want somebody in a film role or a television role that could evoke that kind of emotion. And Freeman's, on a short list of who you would want to play Mirrors.
Oh yeah, definitely. That would be amazing. But more than anything, it would just be cool to hang out with him. He just seems like Morgan Freeman seems like a really cool guy. Even in interviews that I've seen him in and stuff, seems neat. There's a YouTube channel that has called Screen Junkies. I don't know if you guys watch that or know what I'm talking about, but they do, the typical sort of like movie reviews and stuff, but they're very funny. I just like, just the way they do it, I like. And they were doing the press junket for Las Vegas, I think is what it's called. It's the movie, the new Morgan Freeman movie that has Michael Douglas and Robert De Niro and a few other people that are older actors. And Hal Rudnick is the guy who hosts Screen Junkies. He always asks these really offbeat questions. So instead of asking them like legit sort of questions, he asked if they would just in just a normal speaking voice say the words to popular pop songs right now. So like he had Morgan Freeman read the lyrics to that viral song that was what does the fox say, I think is what it's called.
Yeah, what does the fox say?
Yeah, and he's it's just Morgan Freeman, and it's not like he's trying to sound majestic. He's saying it, and the look on his face is like, what is this? Because it's obvious he's never seen it. I don't know. It's just cool. He just seems like a really cool guy or whatever. So if he ever got cast to be Mirrors, I would be all that would be really flattering, amazing.
I love. Mouse.
And I would stalk him. Sorry, I just wanted to add that in there, just in case there's a legal problem later. It's me who's stalking him.
We could always say that somebody stalked him based on your recommendation, but
yes, good for the stalking.
I want to mention a scene when I'm talking about Mouse, because I'm looking at the sequence in issue 5, but I'm jumping back also to issue 2, the Trouncer's dead sequence. I love Mouse because you've got this character in there that adds a comic relief to the book. But at the same time, when the situation calls for it, he's quite deadly and also has a sense of justice, a sense of morality. So he, along with his whole bunch of crazy. So there's something interesting about him because he's a very complex and complicated character. Because you see these sequence with Trouncer, he's dead, and, I loved him, he was my favorite, but I kind of really sort of want to eat him, which I just thought was a great sequence. It just made me smile. I probably reread that the most in that issue, just because, again, another shift of emotions that I think in comics, when you have a great marriage of dialogue with the artistic interpretation of that, And you get that whole emotion. If it's delivered right, it's a special sequence. If it's delivered wrong, it's awkward and the point's lost. That was a funny sequence because the writing and the art just really delivered that journey so well that there's a punchline that either you get it or you don't, and you got it there. And I think comedy is sometimes hard to do when you're doing a very serious story, because there's some very serious drama that's delivered in this, and it's important to have those like comedy beats and then those high action beats, just because you want to keep it moving and keep a lot of intensity going on. This book delivers a great balance with that, but the comedy sequence in particular I wanted to commend you on, because I just thought the two of you did such a great job, the whole creative team just did such a great job of just nailing that, because it looked great and it just made me smile from ear to ear at a point in time where, like, there's days where we all need that chuckle. And The Movement's been one of those books where, and I think that may be why Mouse has been my favorite character, because I've needed that, like, periodically from time to time, that smile. That just kind of, oh, that was cool. And Mouse has been one of those latch-on characters for me where he's quirky, he's weird, but then when he steps up and you see him in his mice army, standing up against people that are cutting out other people's eyes, the cornea killer, you get a real sense of why he's on the team, what he brings to the table, and why he's a guy you'd want to have your back. That's an interesting balance when you've got a comedy character. He reminds me of kind of, and I'm oversimplifying him, Murdoch from the A-Team. Like, because I loved the show The A-Team growing up, and Murdoch was the character that brought a little bit of the crazy, but he also had an incredible usefulness to the team. And you would see him step up from time to time and do all those types of things, kind of like what Mouse does. And I know I'm oversimplifying when I say that. That's what works for me about the character.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of. I mean, that's a good. I hadn't thought about that specific analogy or specifically that comparison. But that's pretty good. And I also like the A-Team quite a bit. There was that and Knight Rider, by the way. That was the things that I looked forward to all the time, like I don't know what night they came on, but it was like either they came on the same night or I just remember them in the same time period, whatever it is. But in any case, the Mouse is, when the first time I drew him, the first couple of times I drew him, I didn't really think of him being as funny or the type of character he is. And I'm not sure if, I don't know how much of that was already, concrete in Gail's head or what, because I pictured him, imagine the stage persona of Chris Angel, Mind Freak. You know who that is. That's how I pictured Mouse at the very beginning. I didn't picture him being as comedic or lighthearted or having that lighter edge. I pictured him always being the way Chris Angel portrays himself when he's performing. And it was funny to me as well to get that, to read the script and to imagine that, and I think I probably chuckled whenever I read that line as well, just because it's also a not completely inappropriate thing if you think of it on a rodent level, like that's, they have no compunction after that, after the, if they're attached to a loved one, so to speak, or a comrade or something, a fellow rat, if that rat dies, it's meat now, I don't know. An interesting and funny character, definitely.
Oh God, yeah, and just the again artwork on him, because it's not even just him, but all the little rats. And when you get those great close-up moments, and where you can actually think that the rat is talking to him, and you can see the emotional expression. Thank you.
You say that again. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, no. You could see it in their eyes, and you can see it in the fur, and just everything how it was laid out. I loved just seeing him when he's writing his love letter. And the contents were hysterical, but just as he's going through trying to figure out, no good, no go, affectionately, thank you, Hubert. And you see that that emotional, wow, that's a good idea. But the one panel before it, you look at that little mouse, and he's sitting there saying, hey, dude, what are you thinking? Come on, affectionately. this is where you want to go with it. I can hear the conversation, and I'm like, this is awesome.
Jim, do you think he's not talking to him?
Well, yes and no, because on one hand, I kind of look at it how with how Aquaman doesn't actually speak to the fish.
Okay.
He guides them along. Now, do rats have a high enough intelligence that they could actually have a conversation? I'm not exactly sure. Rats are more intelligent than fish, so there could be a direct communication. There could be some type of mental link, or it could just be he's mental and he thinks he's talking to them and he's guiding them a la Aquaman.
There's definitely a communication there because he's aware of things that are going on, like what was going on at the street. Yeah. Like with the girl being attacked by the cornea killer. He found that out because the mouse, Gaston, came down and told him. Now, what telling him actually means is open to interpretation. But, I mean, he's able to, there's a telepathic connection. There's something there where he's able to either see that or register what's going on in the mouse's mind. These are his friends. I mean, I definitely get that kind of vibe that this was this disenfranchised kid who, found solace in he likes mice more than people, except for Tremor.
Yeah, he's got it bad for Tremor.
Yeah.
If you look earlier in the first couple of issues, even when there's several times when I've drawn rats in the background because I'm assuming that that mouse would be concerned. There's even with the scene where Mears, I'm trying to think of what issue it is, when the movement itself, like the actual group of them are, rioting, protesting / rioting at the police precinct. Virtue is up in Mears' office talking to him, and there's a couple of rats on the windowsill and stuff, because I picture, they just wanted to make sure to keep an eye out just to make sure everything was all right, And those are things, most of those are not written in the script. Usually whenever I'm it seems to make sense to me that there would be some rats there. Now, I mean, don't get me wrong, Gail writes when she wants rats and stuff, but there's quite a few times that I add one or two in the background when there doesn't need to be, or there's not a requirement. They don't have an active role, but I just assume that Mouse would want to keep an eye out on his comrades.
I love that idea because to me, the sequence with the cornea killer, you clearly see that he is up there because of the fact that the mice were his eyes and ears, or Gaston was his eyes and ears, and you got to see what was going on out there. And for him it'd be interesting to see with him being so young, where that power set could go, because you figure he doesn't have, how much experience does he really have with those powers? And look what he's already doing with it. What if he could refine it, and what would that enable him to do? Because it's really impressive when he comes popping out. Really, he's got this whole rat army below him. Hey, leave the nice lady alone, or I'll tell them you're all made of is cheese. I mean, that was just such a great sequence of events. Very impressive. It's a very a Batman-like visual when he comes out like that. And I don't mean that in a cookie cutter Batman sense. But one of the things I've always liked about Batman's cape has been its ability to become a character in its own way. And when you see him there with the rat mound, it's that kind of visual where they become something more. They become this cool shape that becomes kind of a pedestal for him to be something larger than he actually is. It's that intimidation factor of being larger than life. It's something for him with his backstory and how he was he didn't have that strength to be able to use them to give him this sense of power in that moment. That was a visual that I found particularly striking when he came out. Just the way that he seems more silly in certain sequences. But then you see something like this and you see how scary and dangerous he can be. I like that complexity. It's something about him it's the reason why I'm drawn to the character. I just think he's really interesting.
I wish that drawing that mound of rats was as easy as drawing Batman's cape. Because it takes me... Oh, man. Me and Kiki, because Kiki helps me ink. She does ink assists and stuff for me. Inking a big mound of rats all over the place is not not simple. It is very time consuming, and to try to make it feel both like a mound and also that you can tell what they are. So you need to draw some distinct, clear rats as well. Rats have been the bane of my existence on this series. I'm afraid to say, and I've noticed rats seem to be very popular. Is maybe not popular. I tend to draw a lot of rats. Like I drew some in almost every project. There was something where I was picturing to myself, like I did, on Captain Atom. I think there was some rats in. Was there some in Green Arrow? Maybe I can't remember, but and some in Robin, and there was some other. I'm drawing a blank right now, but there was something in my mind that stood out to me. One of the endless hours that I was awake, drawing that. I've been drawing rats my entire professional career. It's like rats always show up, and I love them. No, they're painful to draw.
Well, that sequence with Mouse, and I think it's good to know as an artist when you draw a sequence like that and it put that effort in, it was very powerful. So that time that you and Kiki put in, really paid off because I really liked that a lot.
Good, thank you.
And especially you get that really kind of the bright scene right next to the more shadowy of you got Mouse on his mound of rats, and then you got Moth right next to him where she's firing up because you just pushed over the wrong girl, and you get that great I don't like to be pushed, just that energy, but not only energy, she goes from being that friendly person who's trying to, be nice to the police officers to, okay, you want to throw down, it's go time. I that emotional switch, but the bright light, the shadowy rats, just side by side, those are both two really cool moments of anger, but it was a beautiful anger.
Sweet. The juxtaposition of them. I have to. There's somebody, that I haven't mentioned. I guess I always think of Chris Sotomayor. I'm not sure the pronunciation, but I always say Sotomayor. So hopefully I'm saying that right. He's the colorist for the movement, and he does some very unexpected stuff sometimes, but he always pulls it off really well. I'm happy that he's on the team, and I specifically requested him, for the book and stuff. So and I'm very happy that they let him come on board and that he could fit it into his schedule. But although the inking and stuff, of course, would imply the contrast in those two panels, but what he does with a lot of the coloring effects really brings the scenes. It helps to make the environment more come to life.
I love that the book has a very unique visual style. Like, to me, it's something that feels very different than anything else I'm reading right now. And that's important to me. Like, my attach rate onto books are really based on, like, a unique emotional feel to it. Like, there's something that gets me excited about a book that's got its own unique flavor. I'm loving to death Animal Man by DC right now, it's another series that, like, if you told me a few years ago I'd be digging Animal Man so much, I would have said to you, I like the character, but it's not going to be one of my favorite books. It is right now. And this book falls into that category for me of just being like, it's something that's so different and really cool. And, there's series that are on my short lists that, like, have that kind of flavor. Actually, Captain Atom was one of those series. It's something very different than any other title that I'm reading, not just from DC, across comics. And those are series that have a resonance for me. They have a special place in my heart because they stand out in a way that other books don't. And the movement really has that flavor for me because of it. Vengeance Moth is one of those characters that when she finally steps up in that moment, one of the things that I really like about this book is the fact that we're getting to know the characters. There have been little origins along the way, but I liked that the series with issue 1 kicked us off with, they're already operating. We didn't see them come together. They were already doing this. And along the way, we're getting to know the backstory of the individual characters, bits and pieces about the team, and that's stuff that I know we're going to get to know more. I prefer that. This is working the way that it's developing really well. Getting to know them, like why I care about them working together first, and then now I want to know, okay, what got them here? That's really an interesting way to do that. I shouldn't say that that's the only way I like it, because there's been other books that have started off with issue 0. I'll go to Starman, which was, another one of my all-time favorite series. Starman, when it kicked off with issue 0, we kind of knew right away what his whole backstory was, and that was cool, right. And that was great, and that worked out well. So I'm into that too. But for this series, it just seems the pacing is just working really well with us getting to know them along our journey. It kind of like we're traveling along. I think it's one of the reasons why it's so easy to travel along with Mears, because we don't know a whole lot more than he does. And that's kind of fun. I think it makes him a sympathetic character because we kind of see things through his eyes a lot easier. So it's cool.
Yeah, he becomes like kind of the guide through. I'm trying to think what that is. It's not called a fish out of water story. Maybe it is called that. Basically, it's like it's a narrative device. It's a narrative tool to have a normal, in quotes, normal person who goes into the unusual situation, so that it kind of shows the audience how unusual these things are. Because if the fish out of water acts like, oh, this is no big deal, or if you have only a bunch of people who are used to all these irregularities, it kind of takes away from the regular the type of experience that this would be for a regular person, in quotes, like a normal person. So to have somebody be surprised and appalled and concerned by all these different things, it becomes like a surrogate for us, as the readers. And I'm glad that it has that unique tone. And I tend to like I tend to like stories that are less, I don't necessarily want to see like how the characters got the lease to their apartment. I don't want to see like all of the stuff that's set up every step along the way. It's okay to jump way ahead and then let's just address stuff that happens as it goes. And part of that is just from whenever the first comics I ever bought were, in the 200 and something numbering. So there was plenty of stuff that I had to, I was jumping in the middle of a bunch of stuff. And so it created mysteries and question marks and something that I think, I'm not like on a anti-internet thing right now, but one of the things that was really fun, like whenever I got my Marvel universes and the DC Comics Who's Who or whatever, I remember reading, it was cool to unravel that mystery, to read back the backstory about the connection between Magneto and Charles Xavier that wasn't fully explained to me in the X-Men books that I was reading at the time. It was cool to hear that background, but it was, in a way, it was more tense. It was more interesting on a narrative level to have them have tension and to know that there was that history, but to not have it spelled out completely, and you only really get that if you jump in the middle of the story.
Yeah, and I liked, for the same reason you're mentioning, I always loved collecting every month, the next book that would come out in those series that would tell you like the backstory and all that. I liked it that way, and you're right, it worked better being in that kind of encyclopedia kind of format. And I think there's still room for stuff like that, even with the internet nowadays, because you still can have the the official company, like this is the origin, and still deliver something like that for the fans. Because you had the great art pieces too, because each page was done usually by a different artist.
Yeah.
So you've got some really wonderful art pieces in that book as well.
Yeah, some of the ones that always impressed me are the type that I would now just really I would fall apart if I had to draw, but it's those very detailed schematical drawings. Those used to blow me away as a kid. I mean, they're still impressive whenever I see that sort of stuff, and especially if they're drawn essentially by hand and not like 3D models. I have nothing against 3D models. I use them all the time, but there's a more impressiveness. There's a higher amount of impressosity, and that's a real word. No one bothered to call me out on it. Of seeing somebody who has labored this really detailed sort of perspective drawing and super clean. It looks mechanical, but there's just a little bit of a hint of being hand drawn because it's the ellipses aren't exactly perfect like they would be if they were drawn in Photoshop or a 3D model program. I love looking at stuff like that.
I loved blueprint books as a kid.
Yeah.
When they'd go along with some form of sci-fi fantasy or comics or when they would have like the cut out of like a headquarters or something like that or a vehicle, because you would get to see certain things like you're talking about, the blueprint side of it. That stuff was fun for me. And you're right. The great thing about those volumes were that you would get to the page with the Batmobile, you get to the page with the Danger Room. And,
that's the one I'm talking about.
Yeah, I mean, huge X-Men fan. So, like, you get to the Danger Room, like, so this is how it works.
Yeah.
and could I build one at home?
And it's something that, actually the comic that you're reading, the Danger Room kind of looks different, but it still makes sense, and it's still cool to see. It's just been drawn in a different fashion or something. There was a book, I'm trying to think. I donated a whole bunch of my old comics to a local library and a charity and stuff that I still kind of have a big collection, but I'm saying, like, I donated a whole bunch of them away, and part of that was my older X-Men stuff that I still like. It's still good or whatever, but I just didn't. I wanted somebody else to enjoy it, But one of the ones that I kept from that was, I'm trying to think of the name of the book, and of course I can't remember it now. But I remember it's like there's a bunch of schematical drawings and stuff in there. It's kind of got a cardstock cover, and it's got a spiral bound spine on the left, whatever. A bunch of the drawings, and the best ones I think are drawn by a guy named Richard Bennett. There's a Danger Room thing. There's one about Cerebro at the time, what Cerebro looked like and stuff. I don't really have a point to that. I don't have an end to that sentence. It was just, I got excited to think about it because I hadn't thought about it in a while.
It's kind of an interesting segue. Robert McIntyre gave us the question earlier about your input on the design of the characters in the movement, but Lee Thompson had a question, and this actually is about your book, the DC Comics Guide to Digitally Drawing Comics. And he was just mentioning that he thinks it's a great book. And he had a couple questions here. The first one was asking you, why did you choose to write it? How did that come about?
I assumed that when I was figuring out how to work that way digital, which isn't the only way, it's not the only way to work digital, but I assumed that there was a lot of other people who were working that way or a superior way or something. So for several years when I was developing that workflow, like whenever I hadn't gotten it down completely, but I kind of knew what I was doing, I assumed I was playing catch up. Nobody else would really benefit from this. But I started posting the system that I'm about to describe, that is described in the book as the hybrid pencil workflow, and so this is how I would describe it, is like you work out your page digital, so you work out your layout and your composition and all your structure and your expressions. You do a clean breakdown drawing, so all your structure is in place, and then you print that out in light blue and right onto your artboard at the correct size so that you don't have to, in the past or previous to that, I was working on like a piece of printer paper. I would do my rough, then I would take it to Kinko's, get it blown up 150 whatever percent, so it'd be at 11 by 17, and then I would meticulously light box it onto my artboard in light blue. And so if you look at those two methods, the sort of all the little, how tedious the light boxing is. If somebody works that way, that's fine if that's how you want to work, but for me it was very tedious. And so that was kind of the system that I was working on at the time, and I posted some stuff on Pencil Jack and on digital webbing, and I think I had like an elaborate perspective drawing in the background, or it was something like that. And somebody was asking me how I created it, and I started going into it, and the response was not like, oh, that's old hat. The response was more like, wow, that's really cool. That perspective tool that you're using, can you give that to me? And I was like, sure. And so I started offering it for free, and it's been for free on my website for the last decade because of that. Literally a decade. It's been actually since maybe even 2002, so longer than a decade. Once I figured out or discovered that there was interest in the subject matter, that set off or put a little pin in or a sticking point in my mind that maybe it's something to address later. But I was picturing more like some elaborate or detailed how-to tutorials online. Just post them for free online, but they wouldn't be nearly as detailed as what's in the book. And then years passed by, and about 2005 or 6, maybe a little bit past that, it was whenever about the time that I was breaking into DC, almost everybody who I met and I talked to about me working digital suggested or was like saying, not many people work that way. Have you thought about writing a book? Because I was doing, like, I had done a presentation at Hallmark Cards, like describing to them how I work, and plenty of those guys work digital, but they were surprised and interested to see how I was treating it in the comic book world. At this point, I I figured that there might be some people that were interested, but I felt arrogant or something, thinking that if I would write this book and like it would be perceived as if I was saying this is the way to work digital, and who does this guy, this Freddie guy, think he is telling us how to work? I'll work however I want to because it's supposed to be organic and we're creating artwork. But a friend of mine at Hallmark, a guy named Carlo Pasqualini, he summed it up for me in a sentence. Like, we had gone out walking over lunch, and then we came back and we were chit-chatting about this stuff, and I told him everything I just told you about. I don't know if I'm going to write this book or try. I don't even know if I'm going to pursue it. And he said, well, the book is going to be written. The question is if you're going to be the one who writes it. And what he meant, and what he continued to elaborate after that, was that it's clear that that's the direction that everything's going anyway. Like, if you were to look at how comics are colored or how comics are written or whatever, it went analog and then it went to digital, and that it's inevitable that it's eventually going to be digital artwork creation. So, eventually somebody's going to write this book. Wouldn't you rather be the guy who puts this out there? And after that, the approach that I wanted to take to it was that I would try to be very conversational and to be informal, so it didn't feel like I was saying this is the only way to work. So anyway, that's a long-winded explanation, but that was where the decision kind of came from. It was just that I could tell that there was some interest in it, and once I got past the part where I would make clear to everyone that I'm not trying to say this is how you should work, this is just how I work, and feel free to do what you want. Those are the two big hurdles, and then after that it was, just the mechanics of trying to find a publisher and all that other stuff.
Lee had a follow-up question, too. He said that, have you had much fan feedback on the book? And he was mentioning that he uses it like a Bible for his digital drawing, and it's fantastic. And he said, thank you for making the complex process so accessible to a beginner. So he connected that way.
Awesome. Thank you. I have gotten, I feel, quite a bit of really positive and favorable and flattering, feedback. And some of that, it really caught me off guard in a pleasant way, of course. And it started the San Diego Con of 2010, I think, maybe. Or what convention was that? I can't remember, because the book came out in September. And so I don't know if it was San Diego. It couldn't have been San Diego because that was too early. It doesn't really matter. The point is, what I'm trying to make is that I had been working on the book for so long that it was just this thing that me and John Morgan, who is my editor on the book and we're still friends, he's a great guy. It was just this thing that he and I were doing for over 2 years. And it was like the following big convention, after the book had been released and had been out for a couple months, there was a whole bunch of people, like maybe 5 or 6 people over the course of the convention, which to me is a lot of people, came up to me at different times saying that they liked the book, and they were asking me for my autograph on the book and how much of a difference it had made to them. And this was the part that really caught me off guard, was that they felt like giving up drawing until they read the book, or they have gotten out of drawing for a while and then this reinvigorated their interest and stuff. To have like an actual person who's made of human parts instead of just this abstract idea of this book or whatever, but to have an actual person in front of me who it's affected their life and has given them useful information, it was kind of emotionally heavy. I don't mean to make it overly dramatic, but it's a big deal to me because I know what it feels like to be overwhelmed by real life circumstances and not feel like drawing, or just whatever might be the circumstance that makes me not feel like drawing. I'm talking about especially when I was younger and I didn't have I knew what I wanted to do, but I didn't know exactly how to do that. And so you start to feel discouraged or whatever. And I use the word inspire because they use the word inspire, to inspire somebody to want to get back into that or to pursue their artwork in a different and maybe, more time effective manner or something. It feels great to get that sort of feedback. So I have gotten quite a bit since 2009 when the book came out. I get a lot of emails, Facebook messages. I'd say at least, I don't know, there's probably at least 10 people at every convention who will say something nice about the book, and maybe 3 or 4 people who have that sort of a feedback where it's like, this has become like a Bible to me. And some of them will say, like, I work a little bit differently. Like, they'll say I ink and manga studio, but I do everything else from your book. And I'm like, that's totally cool. Whatever, however you want to work. It's great feedback, and I appreciate it. For anyone who's listening, who's told me that, I usually make it clear that I really appreciate the feedback, but it's true. I mean, it feels great to get that, and it's thank you.
One of the things that I liked about the book, having the chance to read it, I'm not looking to be a comic creator. I'm a fan. I'm your audience. One of the things that I've found that I've really grown to appreciate and is learning about the process. I think it makes me all the more impressed as to what goes into getting that book out each month. And the work that's done from the writing side, seeing what it's like to do scripts, because I've got DC's book for that. I have your book for digitally drawing. I've gotten the various DC books over the years on the process. I've watched documentaries on it, and not because I'm looking to, as a fan, take a part in any of that. I'm just not. And it's because I appreciate each level of what goes into, in the short period of time you guys have, putting out the amazing product that you do. You accomplish so much in a very short period of time, because it seems like, you look at 30 days, that's not a lot of time. It's really not.
No, man, it's not. It's not much time to get this done. This last year has really made clear to me how little time this last year, 2013, has been a complete blur, and it's been the busiest year I've had since the year of 2005 to 2006, where I was working at Hallmark and doing work at DC full time. This has been comparatively busy. I mean, probably about the same as far as busyness, and the lack of sleep and just trying to keep up with everything. And it's been from basically overcommitting on like 3 different fronts. And that was too many. I agreed to do too many conventions in the same year. And then I agreed to do too many projects in the same year. And then there was a period of time where I also was, and I need to anyway, but like I tried too hard to get into shape. I know that sounds funny, but like it's like to really, to my understanding, having a deadline schedule and trying to get a lot of sleep is almost impossible to do. And becoming healthy, part of that is getting a lot more sleep. And it's been like a 3-way tug of war, that's been really difficult to try to maintain. So anyway, I know what you're saying, and I feel the same way about looking at like the behind the special features on like movies and stuff like that. It's just curiosity, like how is this done? How is this put together? So also recently, just in the last month, another DC Comics Guide book has come out by Carl Potts that's about storytelling, and it's called The DC Comics Guide to Creating Comics Inside the Art of Visual Storytelling. That is such a long title. But it's from what I've read so far, it's a very good book. I haven't gotten all the way through it yet, but Carl Potts is, if anyone doesn't know who he is, he was an editor at Marvel in the early 80s and throughout the 80s, and then I think into the early 90s as well, early to mid 90s. And he helped to discover the talents of Arthur Adams and Jim Lee and Mark Silvestri. Wow. And not just discover them where he was in the room when they, sent in their portfolio, but like where he would, kind of spot them as a diamond in the rough and then help to cultivate their talents. Like he would send them very intricate sort of critiques and stuff and work with them on storytelling and sometimes do layouts for them and all this stuff. So he's highly qualified to write a book like this. So I would, anybody who's interested in that, because it's a type of book that I'm not sure, other than the Scott McCloud Understanding Comics, that is good in a scholarly sort of way and in a conversational way. It doesn't necessarily show how to move the eye throughout the page in the same way that I think this book does. And anyway, it's not a book, or it's not the type of subject matter you can find a lot of information on. So I would recommend getting this book, even though it's got a long title. It's still and it's hard to request. You'll be typing for 10 minutes to try to get the whole title out if you're typing it into Amazon, but it's worth it.
Get a librarian to look that one up.
Yeah. Can you please look up the DC Comics Guide to Creating Comics Inside the Art of Visual Storytelling, please? That's the long title.
Comparison to the special features on a DVD. I love that kind of stuff. I have no interest in being a filmmaker. I love film, though. So I appreciate the artistry that goes into it. And comics, to me, it deserves the same respect of that genre. And so it's any time that you can get kind of that background picture of what it looks like, it just really, to me as a fan, it gives me another lens into this wonderful medium that gives me so much enjoyment. So I appreciated the book, and I did not pick up the Carl Potts book, but I will be because I love I really do love that kind of stuff.
It's much more inside shop, but I mean, you still might dig it, but it might there's less for somebody who's not specifically looking for the nuts and bolts of doing storytelling. There's less to get into or sink your teeth into if you're not really specifically looking for that. But, you might enjoy it, but it's definitely the type of book that I wish I had had access to when I was trying to figure out how to tell a story, visually tell a story, and what the 180-degree rule is, and splitting your image into thirds to get a better composition, stuff like that he talks about. And that's stuff that, I was doing. I had already done like a couple of independent one-shot comic books and hadn't heard of those things before. And then a friend of mine, Jim Mitchell, who wrote Chance of a Lifetime, one of the early books that I did, he pointed it out to me about breaking the 180-degree rule. And I looked it up and was like, oh my God, how did I not know about this for years and years? I felt like like an idiot because it's a big deal. It's a big deal to know that stuff. And some of it I had just been doing on instinct. I had just known something was right or wrong, and I didn't know why. But these were rules to help me double check my work.
Actually, I want to make sure I don't forget Wesley Brown's question, or he actually had a comment. Wesley said that I would love his take on his run on Robin. I thought that it was Tim's design at its best.
Thank you. First, the design as it appeared in issue 149, which was my first issue, had been established already. Like, that was the design that, I believe the artist's name is Carl Kerschel, if I'm not mistaken. He did issue 148, the issue right before I came on. He did one single issue of Robin, and he also designed the character. And initially, he was supposed to be the Robin artist, but he had double booked on some other project, and that's how I ended up getting the gig. The point I'm making there is that I did not design the costume for Robin. I used his design, but through the couple years that I was involved with, working on Robin, I slowly evolved. I evolved some stuff like the shape of his cape and how it attaches to his chest, and him having longer hair and sideburns and stuff like that. But so was the question like for me just to comment on how I remembered the series, like that sort of thing?
Yeah, just kind of what was your take on your time on Robin?
I wish I had worked harder on it, I guess. I loved my time on it. I wish that I could appreciate at the time the kind of awesome book that I was working on. And what I mean by that is not just the Adam Beechin, who was the writer for like the first year or something, but later on Fabian Nicieza I was working with for the bulk of the second half of my run. But I worked with a couple of other great writers too. And it's like I think I took the profile level of the character for granted whenever I first came on. I'd always been a fan of Tim Drake and Robin, and I was like, oh, that's awesome, to come onto it. And it's really cool to get a chance to draw this. But the sort of exposure and profile level was not in the front of my mind as far as how many people were actually reading the book. So I think it's like this with a lot of people's first or early professional work, which is that I just wish that I was working as fast as I could and as hard as I could. So I don't know how I could have, unless I just deprived myself of even further, more sleep or something. But there's stuff that I look at the book and I think I hit some new achievements, and then how I was drawing a foot or, whatever facial expressions. Oops, sorry. I just dropped my ring. And I'm gesticulating wildly with my hands and my ring flew off my hand. But there's other stuff on the series that I feel like it deserved me spending more time on it. It's hard for me to put this. It's all about that I wish that I had had more time to finesse the work, I guess. I miss Tim Drake as a character, as Robin. The whole thing, the new 52 stuff about him being Red Robin and having never been a Robin, I understand why they did that, because the timeline didn't really make sense with the new continuity of Batman and stuff. But it's not as appealing to me. I just like the sort of place he was emotionally and where he started and where we ended up over the course of that time. I think I've probably said this to you guys before, though, is that I felt like I got to know Tim Drake as a person. And during those 2 years since I was drawing him, I was spending every day with him, so to speak, that I felt like I got to know him. And then whenever I was no longer drawing him, I felt like he was a friend of mine that had moved away. And when I get to, at conventions, I do a lot of commission work, and I always do at least one or two Tim Drake Robins at almost any convention. And that's great because I feel like I'm getting a chance to meet up with an old friend. It feels like I'm getting to visit with that old friend or something. So it's like anything else, you don't really have perspective on it until after it's gone. And now that it's gone, I'm like, I wish I could draw that series again. I wish that incarnation was around so that I could draw. And hopefully I'm a better artist now and a better storyteller now, that I could do a better job at it. So there was even a short period where I had heard a rumor at DC that they were going to do a Red Robin series. And of course that could still happen or whatever, but I'm just saying it hasn't happened yet. But this was like earlier this year, and I lobbied very heavy. Like I was making a nuisance of myself to the editors. I did like a sample piece, like a pitch piece basically, and I kept checking in with them to see if any word had come around and all that stuff. And it would be a different character and stuff. It would just be fun to draw him again, just as visiting my old friend. So well, I guess that's it.
I think as fans, it's actually, you mentioned something that I think I would love to see with the character. I'm enjoying the Red Robin of the New 52. I think the one disadvantage he has right now is there hasn't been the chance, because he hasn't had a solo series, to get to know him on the level that you're mentioning. And I think he would benefit from having a solo series to have that. And I think there's a chance to really explore who he is as a character in this world. And for us as fans to get to know him again in this world. Because that's the one thing with the New 52 is everything that happened before, but the universe has shifted. And so because of that, this isn't that guy. Mm-hmm. And there's a chance to get to know this guy in that way. And he did that. I mean, I thought that series it's something we're missing right now. There's a gap. There's an opportunity to fill a hole by putting that series back in place, with Red Robin or whatever route they would go with that. So I would love to eventually see something like that for a lot of the reasons you mentioned that you connected with him as an artist working on the title.
Thanks. Well, and sign me up if you hear of a book like that. Yeah, let me know, and I'll try to dig around again and see if I can make a nuisance of myself enough that they'll say, okay, fine, you can draw it, because it would be really fun. It would be fun to revisit the new continuity and draw Tim again.
I absolutely loved, your drawings of Tim, and just, in and out of costume. And again, those just, you're sitting there talking about how you get, hang out with an old friend. I'm completely in agreement with you. I went back and I picked up, the full Robin run, because I started reading it, at the year one stuff, and started reading, when I first started reading when you came on it. Then after that point, I went back to get all the back stuff. And I still remember there was a lot of stories that I thought were great stories, but I was sitting there going, dang it, I wish Freddie had drawn this, because it would have just, there would have been, there's another level to it.
I've been around in the industry long enough that just at this New York con, there was a few younger people, both guys and girls, that were saying that Robin was the first comic, or one of the first comics, that got them into reading comics, and it was my run on the book, because that was in late 2005, so maybe the first issue came out early 2006. I was working on it in 2005 though, but and that's 8 years ago. Wow. Am I wrong in this? That was 8 years ago, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Because it's now 2013, right? Okay, I just want to make sure, because it sounds like it was so. Just to say the words like that, to say the numbers rather, that sounds so long ago, but my memory of it is very clear. It's a blur, but it's also clear. It's hard to describe, but it just doesn't seem like it's been 8 years. But there's these teenagers who were very young when reading that book, and that's surreal as well. It'd be really, I don't know, it would just be fun to go back and revisit the character for sure.
So a blur that's a clear, is that a blur, or is it a clearb? Or
it is a clearb. I'm glad
Okay.
I'm glad that you mentioned that. Yeah, it's definitely a clearb.
Okay.
You heard it here first. It's a clearb.
Do you find that as an artist that you're kind of critical of yourself on your books after you leave them? Because like when you were sitting there talking about your Robin run, I'm like, I loved every bit of your Robin run. But I get what you're saying. Like, I think when you're that close to work that you're on, because one of the things I've always appreciated about your art is it's evolved. And I've enjoyed that journey. I think with my favorite artists, you see from like where you first got to know them to where they're presently at. A continual evolution. They're trying new things. They're getting to know new art styles. They're trying, little tweaks and splashes. And there's something that still is definitely them that is distinctive. And you look at them and go, okay, I can tell it's this person right away when I see their work. But there's also that, wow, they're doing something cool here. Do you find that you do that like when you leave a series or while you're working on a series, that you have that same feeling that you had when you were talking about Robin?
Yeah, yes, definitely. In retrospect, if there's been more than a couple of months that have passed, usually all I see are the flaws in the work on any work that I've done. Now, it's not all negative. I mean, that sounds very pessimistic, but it's more of a regret that I wish that I could have, finessed that a little bit more. That might be just the mild version of what I see on a page. But then there's other times where it's like, I really didn't know how to draw that expression at the time, and I remember struggling with it, and I can tell I didn't really pull it off, and now I'm kind of embarrassed by that page. There's that type of thing that happens more on the extreme end. Or there's even very minor stuff or kind of medium stuff where it's like my inking technique was still it wasn't diverse enough. It was still a little too slick on everything, but in these rocks I should have gone for something more gritty to change the sort of texture or something. So there's a combination of those sort of things. And it's not like every single thing embarrasses me, but as more time goes by, it then begins to start to feel I feel embarrassed that, I didn't realize this thing that I was doing wrong or, something like that.
See, I think in my eyes, that's what makes you a relevant artist. And I kind of look at this from a teaching standpoint. I think like every year that I've taught, I do something better than I've done the year before. I've learned from something that maybe didn't go the way, like maybe it did the job for my students and they learned a lot and their test scores were good and all that. But there was something for me that because I think when you're that close to something that you're creating, you really cut it down if you care about it and evaluate it and just kind of you pick it apart in a way that maybe no rational human being should, but but it's part of bettering yourself and kind of evolving and growing and things like that. And I would like to think that any year that I've taught, I've done something different. I've grown in some way. I've learned something from something that I personally didn't like, or I felt like, wow, I liked that, but if I tweaked this a little bit, I would love it so much more. I think there's something to that, and I think it keeps you relevant. It keeps you current. It keeps you pushing yourself in a way that is fresh. I don't know. I think in comics, it's one of the reasons why there's people that become your favorites. I see it in your art. I'm wowed by it with each new project that you do, because I think I'm not an artist. I'm not a trained artist. I'm the fan. I'm the person that you're drawing for. And when I see something new of yours, I get excited because I know that there's going to be something that's going to feel fresh and wow me. And it's hard to even pin down what that is exactly, but it's because of the fact that you're growing. And I feel that. And I don't always feel that with every book that I read. I don't get that kind of sense of, ooh, there's that something new there. There's that, there's that something that just kind of gets you. But I think it comes from that. And I think there's an importance to that in any art form or anything that you're doing. And I just use my job as an example because for me, that's the only way I can connect
sure, yeah.
on that end. But I think I think there's something to that. You become stagnant if you don't have that kind of vibe in anything that you're doing.
Well, first of all, thank you. And second of all, that fear of stagnation or just the drive to want to learn something else, that's definitely where the experimentation comes from. I think some artists might not be as willing to experiment as much or as often or something, partially because if they get the type of feedback that I get, there are people, I mean, there's not like overtly negative people who say this to me, but it's like people who say, I really liked your Robin stuff, the JSA All-Star stuff was pretty cool, and then they'll say, but that Captain Atom was, kind of far out. And what they're saying is, in a way, they're saying, like while I was doing Captain Atom, they were saying, I like your older stuff better. And that's cool. I can understand that. There's artists that I collect that I like a certain type of style or their work on a certain book better than the book that followed that or, whatever. So some artists might be afraid to explore out too much because that's the sort of reaction they get. You get a little bit of you buck against your fans. You might even buck against the expectations of editors sometimes. So there's some inherent risk involved if you jump around as much as I sometimes do. But, I've been lucky from a DC comic standpoint that they've supported me in all these different types of experiments or whatever. I think that I started doing some changing things up early enough in my career, my visible career, that people who are reading the books kind of have gotten used to it, hopefully by now, that I'm prepared to do something hopefully new on each book, a new take on each thing, a difference in my style or something to try to make it unique to that book and just to keep it interesting and lively and all that stuff.
Well, I like the variations, when we get from the different books and you have the little tweaks to your style that goes through. That's something I've always enjoyed, but there's always, for me, that underlining, this is Freddie art. You're one of the art creators that I can actually look at and say, okay, that's Freddie, without even knowing, without seeing creative stuff. That style, that is yours, it's... I'm comfortable with it, I enjoy, but I like seeing the little modifications for this character.
Thank you. One of the things I've been trying to do on the movement in the past, whenever like with JSA All-Stars, that was my first time drawing a team book, and I wasn't really used to drawing a cast of characters that were hopefully going to be unique or something. So I when looking back at that work, I can tell I was not as successful with creating a distinctiveness between the body type and face of Cyclone versus Stargirl. And even sometimes Power Girl, even though she should be much more stocky and have a more rounded face, there's a different, in my mind, I'm picturing their faces side by side of how they should be. I was caught up in deadline and inexperience and sometimes drew them almost as the same person. So on the movement, since now I'm getting another opportunity to do a team book, and I've learned from those mistakes, I've been creating style guides for myself, like animation. If you ever worked in animation or have seen the behind-the-scenes stuff on Disney DVDs or something, they'll create style guides that have the same character drawn on one page, but like different facial expressions, slightly different, facial angles, like, different and stuff to make it clear to yourself or another artist later the nuts and bolts of drawing this character's head shape and that sort of thing. I've been developing style sheets for each character as I go, and every time I draw them, I'll bring up that style sheet to try to keep the characters as consistent as possible and to make sure I'm not... Because after a certain point, you do get used to drawing these characters, and you can start winging it, and that's okay, but if you wing it too much, it's easy to start forgetting the distinctiveness, little unique aspects that make that character who they are. So, for example, I was drawing in Nashville. There was somebody who had commissioned a Stargirl commission from me, and it had been a long time since I had drawn her. So I had to really, really bring up in my mind, what was it again that was Stargirl, like the face shape, and I did some like a Google search to find the specifics of her costume to make sure I got that right. And the point that I'm making is that on the movement, since I've been drawing it for 8 months now, I don't want to get so comfortable that I start making Catharsis look too much like Trimmer or like Virtue or whatever. So I'm trying real hard to keep them, unique looking.
So I wanted to make sure I got all the questions. I'm not ignoring you. I wanted to.
Whatever. I know how it is now. You've made it clear. No,
that's talk to the hand.
Because we're done listening at this point.
I haven't done the Facebook thread in a long time, so I want to make sure I got everybody off there. I want somebody to go, hey, you got everybody's question but mine. We're good on that end. You know, it's funny when we're looking at the movement. I want to make sure to talk about a couple other things from the issue, because we haven't talked a lot about Tremor and her relationship with the team, which has been one of the things that I've really enjoyed from the series. She starts off seeming like she's like this rock-solid member of the team, but we find out that she's got a secret. She's actually a plant put there by Amanda Waller. Mm-hmm. And she has the decision, you know, like, are these my friends? Because we've, you know, become comrades at arms, you know, and do I stand by them? Do I stand by Waller? And then also, where do my ethics come into all this? Because she has that moment with Catharsis in issue 5 where she's kind of taken a stand against Catharsis that has nothing to do with Amanda Waller. It's her own issues with Catharsis really almost crossing the line of taking down one of the police officers, which he's egging on because it's really just going to further show the movement as being like rebels, renegades, that the general public shouldn't rally behind. They're not symbols, they're dangerous, and you should not want to be a part of this group. So there's a symbolism there. I really loved her role in this issue, and I've loved this kind of on-again, off-again, behind the scenes that the team doesn't really know about. You know, she's with them, she's not with them. And here's why. And I think there's a reality to that. You get to know some people, and it seemed very easy at first to be a plant on the team, but then you get to know the people on the team and get to see what they're really fighting for, and maybe their own innocence. And even if you don't 100% agree with them all the time, if you see at the core what they're trying to do, it can be easy to get sucked into that. I loved it. I think that part of that character is really rich.
I think, yeah, I know that Tremor had existed in comics before. Like, her and Catharsis were the only repeating characters that I'm aware of in the comics, and I'm not sure what her role was. Did you guys ever see anything of her before the movement?
She was in Secret Six, but
okay.
But we're going back in the old universe. I don't remember her being, and I could be wrong on this, I don't remember seeing her in the New 52 other than in the movement. Okay.
All right. Well, because I'm not real sure of her history even in Secret Six, if it's from the old universe, to have it inform any of the stuff. They supplied me with her new bio, and then like how she was previously designed, and I made like 2 changes to her costume. She was the one that I had to change the least, you know. But yeah, I mean, I think from the beginning, like Gail had written, I think what she wrote in there was, you know, that Tremor was a plant, and so I thought I've been surprised at, even though I'm working on the book, by that I like Tremor and by where the complexities of her character are going, because I know a couple of issues ahead of what you guys have read or whatever. But she's a cool character. I just like the complexity of it, and I'm not really sure how much I should say, just to be honest, because it's been a couple. I'm foggy headed enough that I don't want to say anything that's a spoiler. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not sure what exactly has. I know that issue 5 is the most recent, but 6 comes out like on Wednesday. But I'm not 100% sure what these things are in my memory when they are shown in the comic. You know?
Well, I'll tell you where she's at right now. She's at the point where Catharsis is ready to use her sword on our favorite police baddie, and she decides that's going too far, and basically says, if this is the way the movement operates, I quit.
Then
and that's where we've left off with her. So we're kind of left with a cliffhanger. Is she really going? Is she staying? What's going on? That's kind of where we're left with her. Yeah. And her history, she was in Secret Six, she was as an adult, working for Waller then as an adult, leading them to Skartaris. So that was her role back then before the New 52, none of which would be in continuity now, because this is now a teenager in this, but she has the same ties that she had in the previous continuity, just in a much younger sense. you guys are getting the chance to kind of explore her now in a way that we as readers never got to see in the past. So this is kind of a new, a younger take on her, getting to see maybe how she first got her start with Waller, and whether or not she is actually going to stay with Waller remains to be seen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm going to sidestep.
I would, and I totally get why. It was more. I was throwing it out there, just figuring, like, just for the listeners, that's kind of where we're at with the character and what we can share with the character at the moment. Because we were left with the cliffhanger in this issue was with Mouse standing. Basically, the Cornea Killer is with the Graveyard faction, and we're waiting to see next issue what this is going to be. Really, our first super team battle of sorts. We're going to see, because who knows what. We don't know as readers where that's going to go. Is it going to be Mouse by himself? Are the other team members going to show up? What is that all going to look like? Because the rest of the team has a lot going on in the midst of all this. So it's interesting to see how all of this comes together in the next issue. It was a great cliffhanger because getting to see, our first villains team kind of standing against the movement was really cool at this point. And it makes sense that they would generate this kind of buzz, that there would be a hit put on them, because we haven't talked about the fact that they've got corporations, who have a reason to be angry with them. There's money backing that with what was going on with James Cannon. And that's something that I also like. It's not just the police, and arguably with a different role, the money people controlling Coral City have a reason to take major issue with what's going on with the movement, because they've got things the way that they like them. And now you've got this group of people that are shaking things up. And that's going to affect their financial bottom line. Anytime you do that, now there's going to be finances put towards putting a stop to this. Especially when you see that movement is no longer relegated to just Coral City. There's pockets starting to pop up all over the place from it. So it's that part of the series is something I'm really liking as well, that it's not as simple as the police versus the movement. It goes way beyond that to the actual power infrastructure. The authority isn't just the police. The authority is the financial backing, which would lead into politics, which would lead into stores, which would lead into banking, would lead into all kinds of power plays through the leadership of the city. I think that part is going to be really interesting to see explored.
I agree, yeah. There's also a tie with the Green Team that I would like to see how that plays out. I know that they're planning on making a connection, or making it connect more between the two books. But anyway, yeah, I'm not sure exactly when that will happen. Obviously, not in this story arc, because we're trying to pay all this off that she's set up and stuff. But it would be cool to see that as well, because to me, it's all related. It's all connected as far as the sort of the power structure and what happens when things get disrupted. Is there's a shift, and or there might be a shift, but the people who are in power want to use their power to keep a hold of it.
Is there anything else you guys want to say about the movement? I want to talk a little bit about some of your other work before we wrap up, so I want to make sure to give us some time for that. But is there anything else either of you want to say about the movement that we haven't had a chance to say?
Not that I can think of. I mean, I think I already mentioned when the next issue comes out, which is issue 6, but that's all that I would... I think that comes out on this Wednesday, which is the 6th. So it's the 6th issue, and it's coming out on the 6th.
And if you haven't picked up this series, one of the great things is nowadays it's so easy to jump on board a series and check out if it's right for you. You can grab it digitally. You can go to your local comic shop and grab it. It's very easy to instantaneously try it out. And I encourage you to try out a few issues of this series to see if it's right for you, because it's a story that, to me, you don't appreciate if you don't see a couple issues of development. Because once you get to know these characters, gradually through the events that are surrounding them, you become hooked very quickly. And it's been a very richly developed... I prefer that. To me, it's if characters have depth to them, it takes you a few issues to really start to get to know and get invested in them. And the movement is one of those series where the characters, the cast, has a lot of depth to them. And you really need that time with them. So I encourage you to read at least the first few issues to see if it's the right title for you. And if you do, please call into the show and let us know what you think. because I would love to follow up with some listener chat on how you felt about the book, because to me it's a book well worth reading, and it's a great opportunity to jump on now because there's a lot of content to be able to dig your teeth into, and it's a great book. Guys, I want to talk a little bit, if we could, about Dark Horse Presents, because this was cool for me. It's we're used to Freddie, your DC work and all that, and it was Brain Boy. I'm a big fan of anthology titles because it's a chance to, stretch your legs, read some things that are a little experimental. Sometimes they launch into series. I know Brain Boy is launching into, it is a series now. But you got to, how did Brain Boy come about for you? Because this is cool. It was 3 parts in Dark Horse Presents. It was Dark Horse Presents 23, 24, and 25. And I was already a reader of Dark Horse Presents. I love anthology titles. I love to see when creators have the chance to, try out some new things. How did you get involved in this?
Let's see. I got actually through Twitter. It's weird. There was my editor for the Dark Horse Presents stuff, a guy named Jim Gibbons. He tweeted me one day. I think Kiki and I were at Sam's Club or something like that. I can't remember, but I was checking Twitter and I saw this tweet pop up and it was from Jim Gibbons, and I looked to see who that was, and he's an editor at Dark Horse, and I'd had no previous contact, and he was like, hey, Freddie, shoot me an email or something like that, and I was like, that's weird, because this isn't, I'm not even talking about a direct message, I'm saying on Twitter, like just anyone could see it, but of course I wasn't following him, so it's not like he could send me a direct message. Anyway, we ended up hooking up through email. Basically, he wanted to talk to me. He said that he liked my Robin work, that was where he first got to know my stuff, that basically he thought Brain Boy was, first of all, anyone who might be thinking to themselves, Brain Boy, like that's a strange title, and it is. It's a very strange title. The character goes back. It has been around for, I think, since the late 60s or something, and he used to be a character from the Gold Key universe, or the Gold Key, is where it was published. Jim got a hold of me, said that he knows that the name sounds a little funky, but that it's actually a really cool story. He always thought it was neat that it had kind of an eerie mix of this. It's like a young government agent who they call Brain Boy. He doesn't like that name. That's what other people call him, and that he has psionic powers. And the 1960s and 70s story, they had recently reprinted through, Dark Horse had bought the rights to Brain Boy and had recently printed a collection of that old Gold Key stuff. So he sent that to me, and I read it, and I thought it was interesting as well, and a little eerie. That sounded cool. And initially we were talking about just doing the short stories. It had, when I got the script for the first issue, I was like, this has a 1-page scene that's probably the most daring thing I've drawn ever. And I'm surprised. I know it's Dark Horse, so Dark Horse gets away with, they have darker, more adult content at times. And this is like one of the most graphic violence things that, ever that I had drawn. So, but I love that sort of thing. I have at times a dark sense of humor, and I'm very interested in reading about the psychology of like serial killers, and all this other stuff is very interesting, very intriguing to me. It was so it was fun to draw this because I don't normally get the chance to do that. You can't really do that sort of really graphic violence. It's usually implied. You can draw somebody getting punched and their teeth knocked out, but it's another thing when you draw them in how it was shown in Brain Boy. And I'm not sure if I should just say what it is, because it's only a 1-page thing, whatever.
Oh, you might as well, because I think the sequence was like, wow, it was a very powerful sequence.
Yeah, so I won't say why this happens, but basically Brain Boy is at a conference where all the world leaders, I don't know if it's the G4 convention, but it's something along those lines. So Brain Boy is like among all of the security agents, and it's partially his job to use psionic powers to scan all of the people who are in the building to make sure none of them have a negative intent towards any of the world leaders, but specifically the president. He detects a little something like it doesn't really matter, but we jump ahead and he sees somebody who catches his attention. He goes upstairs, and when he walks upstairs, somebody is like, hey, Brain Boy. And when Brain Boy comes out to talk to him, the guy pulls out his weapon and cocks it, and Brain Boy's like, whoa, because he, what is it? This is a security guy. This is like a Secret Service agent who's pulled out his gun and has cocked it, and it seems really weird. It's caught Brain Boy off guard. Before Brain Boy can do anything or intervene or whatever, in his surprise, the Secret Service agent just turns the gun on himself and blows his own head off. So there's a page that has that shot where he's blowing his own head off, and then in the next panel it shows Brain Boy turning to see the snipers that are nearby, because generally speaking, if there's a big government sort of rally, anything where a government official is going to be out in the open, a bunch of like world leaders are going to be in a public place like this, there's usually snipers on the roof and stuff. And so all the snipers all jump off the building and kill themselves by just jumping off this tall building into the courtyard. Kiki's grandmother was like, oh my goodness, like when I showed this, because I always show her all the artwork that I do and stuff, and I was drawing it while she was over one day. She's like, what is this for, like, because it was
just doodling.
But, yeah.
That's how I think.
And I think, I'm not sure, because she's kind of got a funny, she's got a very funny sense of humor as well, Kiki's grandmother does. And we somehow joked that I had shot my own head off and drew it real quick just so I could see what it looked like. I can't remember exactly how that joke. It's a pretty morbid joke, but at the time it was just very funny, and it helped to ease the tension of her looking at this horrific scene. But anyway, when am I ever going to get to draw something like that again? So that was like in the first chapter, I believe. But in any case,
it's in issue 23.
Okay, that's how I got involved. I did the 3. It was a story that had its own end, in those 3 different parts. It's 3 8-page stories. And then initially, because Jim and Scott Alley, who's Scott is the editor-in-chief at Dark Horse, they liked the work, and they asked if I could. They were thinking about doing a mini-series, and would I be able to take over? And I was like, I'm sorry, I've already agreed to do the movement over here. They liked what I had done on Brain Boy, and there's a chance that in the future I might be able to do some more stuff with it, depending on how that first miniseries goes.
One of the things I really liked about Brain Boy, and we didn't get a chance to talk too much about this, he has telepathic powers, and in the world of like counterterrorism and intelligence, he views himself as like the future generation. He is the one that's coming in and showing them how it should be done in a modern age, because he has that distinct advantage of being able to read minds. So when they're calling him Brain Boy, he's hearing that in his head.
It bothers him. He doesn't want it to bother him. That's the thing. It gets under his skin, but he doesn't. He wishes that it didn't get under his skin.
Well, I liked it when he called in for backup. Mm-hmm. And he gives his name, and they didn't know who he was initially, and he'd say, it's Brain Boy. Oh, okay, yeah.
I guess what I'm thinking with him is he's got this cocky exterior that he so blatantly puts off onto others to kind of put them where they're trying to put him in his own way. And I think you see that a lot with people who are bullied. They run into a situation where the only thing they know, because they had that so long, is to push back the same way, kind of history repeating itself. He's bullied in many ways in his life, and it's something that you get to know throughout the journey with him. And maybe I'm oversimplifying it with putting it that way, but I really love that the character is not, like on the surface he comes off as cocky and confident. You see that he's had to overcome a lot to get himself to the point where he feels like he believes in who he is in this role. But I really love his kind of, like, to put this character in counterterrorism and intelligence has been really great, because there's a sense of, I was almost going to say James Bond-like mystery, but it doesn't have like the gadgetry and gizmos and that type of thing, and it's more cerebral than that. Mm-hmm. But
no, you're right though, as far as that is definitely it's weird to put my finger on it, because now that I'm trying to describe it, I thought I was going to be able to easily sum it up, but I'm having a hard time. But that is a part of it. It's partially the cool car that he has. Mm-hmm. The style of his suit is inspired by, it's a combination of the James Bond feel meets to me at least in my mind, 1950s sort of Secret Service look, and added to that, this is going to sound funny, but in his facial design, there's a little bit of Dick Van Dyke. That might be really weird. But there was a Dick Van Dyke feel whenever I was drawing him, and so I always try to think of, Dick Van Dyke's got the the shape of his nose and stuff. It's kind of flares out at the bottom, and even in the hairstyle, it's weird to think about. But if you were to see the reference that I pulled, it was like, this is the guy. You know,
I can see the vibe to it though, but
Yeah.
it's not like the chimney sweep. It's more of a serious Dick Van Dyke. I get it.
Right.
Yeah, he's not like Brain Boy's not doing like Chim Chimmer, you know, and all that.
Although now that you mention that, that's a really good scene idea that I need to include. No. And my Brain Boy pitch is going to be him masquerading as a chimney sweep. You know? No one would suspect it.
No, admittedly, no. The car is cool.
Yes, yeah. And he knows it's cool, too.
That's one of the things that I like about him. He has that air about him of arrogance, but it's not as simple as that, which is something interesting. That's where I identify with him, in the sense that he's, again, another character that's complex and there's more to him than he initially presents. You guys do a lot with him, and I'm trying to tease things as opposed to doing a cover-to-cover on this, because I think people should read this if they haven't. It was Dark Horse Presents, again, 23, 24, and 25, and they're available digitally. Jim, actually, you got yours from the Dark Horse app, didn't you?
Yeah. I went to the website and you can pick it up, and that's how I've been reading these.
It's a very cool book, and the cool part about those are, if you haven't read Dark Horse Presents, it's an anthology title. You get a lot of story in there, and actually Bloodhound is in there as well, which was formerly a DC book.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was published by DC years ago, and then just got canceled. And it was cool to see. It's actually the same creative team.
That's cool. Yeah, I didn't. I knew that it was in the Dark Horse Presents, but I didn't know that it had been a DC book. That's cool.
Yeah, it was Dan Jolly and if I'm probably butchering his last name, and Leonard Kirk did that for DC, and then they're back doing it again at Dark Horse, and I think that one's going to series as well, or mini-series from Dark Horse Presents. So that's one of the cool things about Dark Horse Presents. Some of the stories are, contained within Dark Horse Presents. Other ones, like, they use as kind of a prelude to doing a mini-series or an ongoing. And I like that kind of experimental nature of Dark Horse Presents. It was something in its first run, initially, that was where a lot of their key franchises came from. It came from Dark Horse Presents. So it's great that they relaunched this book. Now we're 23, 24, and 25 into that series, and we're seeing again, this is, where a lot of creativity is coming out of Dark Horse, of bringing back unique characters and concepts and giving them a shot. I think that's a great use for an anthology title, and I'm glad to see that kind of thing going on at Dark Horse, because I think it's super cool.
I agree. It is surprising to me when I was doing creator-owned stuff before I broke into DC and stuff. There was a consensus at the time that anthologies just don't sell, and I'm assuming that that's true, or else they would be a lot more popular at Marvel and DC. Like if those were popular sort of subject matters or types of books, that they, in quotes, just don't sell. And I think that's unfortunate. I love that sort of that grab bag, that variety of different types of things, because it's another way to get exposure to things you wouldn't necessarily pick up a book called Brain Boy, or pick up a book with a title of a character you don't necessarily know, and you're risking your $4 or however much it is on this unproven quantity from your perception. So picking up an anthology book at least gives you a flavor of, oh, okay, that would be pretty cool, or this isn't exactly for me, but at least the whole book isn't a bust because I've got these other stories I like, So yeah, I'm with you on that.
Well, things like Concrete from Paul Chadwick came from, Dark Horse Presents. Sin City was done in Dark Horse Presents. Aliens, Predator.
Good point, yeah.
Buffy the Vampire Slayer and stuff like that. These are big franchises that historically, Next Men, there's a lot of great books that came out of Dark Horse Presents. When that series was first launched, I was a big fan of it. And to see that come back around again, and I just hope people are giving books like that a chance, because I'm with you. My feeling is, and actually I think it's on its, I take it back, I think it's on its third series now, Dark Horse Presents. I wish they would do better in comics, anthologies as a whole, because I do think there's a great opportunity in there to tell a variety of different stories that maybe are perceived as not being able to grab a readership, but maybe through buzz, through an anthology, that might be a way to test some concepts that maybe a company doesn't feel has legs. And but it's unique enough that it's worth taking the risk of putting it in an anthology to see if maybe they were wrong. Because sometimes you don't know until you get something into the hands of the readers what will take. And I think an anthology is a great way to do that. I've always been a big believer in them. And I've always enjoyed them for the variety of stories you get in them. And I just think Dark Horse Presents has been one of the more successful anthology series, and I'm just glad to see it back again for stories like this, because I thought this Brain Boy was fun.
And you get to see a bunch of people commit suicide. So,
Well, and the reason why we're dancing around it, and we kind of have to, because you really got to read the story and see what's going on there. It's a very cool story that's got this kind of espionage going on, and you see that Brain Boy, I guess, is it okay to say that he's not alone in the world? And we'll kind of leave it at that?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I don't think I'm revealing too much by saying that.
Nah.
Yeah, that would be. It's a fun, interesting ride, and really, basically, all we talked about in this little chat has been contained in the first 8-page story. So there's 2 more 8-page stories that build off of this one that you really need to check out, and it's a very cool story. So check that out in Dark Horse Presents. Jim, was there anything else you wanted to say about Brain Boy or anything? Or?
Well, I gotta say, just high levels of impressosity. As going through that. That's going to become my new favorite word, by the way. And, of course, just some great opposition for him. A lot of good, solid strategery. I realized I hadn't said it yet. I'm like, oh, my God, I got to throw it out there.
You didn't have to. You really didn't.
Yes, I do. If I don't, I get emails. I get flooded with thousands on thousands and thousands of emails.
If only all those people would listen to the show. Thousands upon thousands upon thousands.
Yes.
That is an awful lot of emails.
It's amazing how many emails I get if I don't say that.
I want to talk about Legends of the Dark Knight, number 48. This was the unlucky 13 issue. Actually, a lot of what I just said about Dark Horse Presents, I want to point at Legends of the Dark Knight. This has been, throughout its history, the experimental Batman series. This was the one where it's not in continuity. You can do things from continuity, though, too. So it's always been one of those series where creators kind of have free reign to kind of tell a well-pitched Batman story, and we as the readers benefit from that. It's something, I like that some of them are done in one. I like that some of them are multi-part. I like that it's starting out as a digital-first series, but then being released and in paper copies as well, so it hits everybody. I was so glad to see this series relaunched the same way that I'm mentioning with Dark Horse Presents, because, again, it's a chance for creators to do something really creative. How did you get involved in this story? Because I really liked this one. I'm a Batman junkie. So anytime you get to see a great Batman story, especially one where you're doing things like you were doing in Unlucky 13, I'm a big fan of it. But what got you involved in this one? Because it was a cool story.
Thank you. I have been in conversations with Hank Canals off and on. Hank Canals is, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I don't think I've ever actually heard his name pronounced out loud, but he is the head of DC Digital, and I don't think he edits all those, but he was my editor on that project. In any case, I had been talking to him about some other ideas that I had for some DC digital things, and we had been talking off and on for like the last 2 years, where we would set up phone calls and chat, and then it's like nothing would really happen, and for good reasons. I understand what's going on, but nothing I can say. But so I think that might have put me on his radar just as something to do with him, maybe. So specifically for Legends of the Dark Knight, I just got an email where Hank said, "Hey, I'm sorry. Actually, he replied to one of my emails about the digital thing I was talking about, and he said that he might have something else if I'm interested doing something with Batman." I was like, "Oh yeah, definitely." And he said it would be a short story, and so I thought it would probably be 8 pages actually. Then he contacted me and he said, "Hey, I won't have it for you for a couple of weeks, but here's the 10-page story and here's the gist of it." And I was like, "Oh, that sounds great." When I say here's the story, he was just saying the format, who the writer was, which is Tim Seeley, if I'm not mistaken, because it's been a few months since I've looked at it. And I said, "Yeah, great." And then like 2 days later, he had it for me. So it wasn't in a couple of weeks. And that caused another couple of very, very long nights because it was like, oh, Not in a couple weeks. Okay, gotcha. That was it. It was great to draw Batman, and I did all of my visuals in continuity just because I had not drawn the New 52 versions of the characters, so it had primarily Batman, and then it had Damian Robin shows up for like 2 or 3 panels, so he's in there very, very briefly, but it was fun. I think, and the Penguin is in there too, but it was... Man, that was a long time ago. The fact that book, because it just came out like, a couple weeks ago? Or like maybe a month ago at the most? Mm-hmm. The book version. But yeah, I did that I think my deadline for that was like February 15th, or, you know what I mean? It was like something in the very early in the year. And then, of course, it was digital for a long time. And then, so there's a big lag in when it's digital and then goes to print. So that was surprising.
It was released May 2nd in digital, and I got it digitally because I love getting that. I love getting that series digitally. It just, the format of it, the way the stories are constructed, just seems to, your story was self-contained in its own digital issue. I thought that was really great, and for me, it was super cool to see you on a Batman book. I'm like, this is really awesome. Yeah. And one of my questions was going to ask you, how much creative control did you have with doing the 10-page story on deciding the design of Batman's costume? Where did you draw from? And you kind of answered that. You're just kind of like, hey, this is my chance to kind of do the New 52 Batman. It was kind of cool.
Yeah, that was exactly it. And Hank had made it clear to me, because I was like, my first question was, can you send me reference of whatever version that you want me to draw? And he was like, no, it's up to you. And the only thing that had to be, actually, no, that, I guess, because we show Crime Alley. That was like the only thing that he really provided, like he provided reference for. And because that needed to be somewhat recognizable, which is like right across from the theater and all that stuff. Little kid Bruce had been at seen Zorro or whatever. So that was about the only reference that he gave me. Other than that, he just kept telling me, yeah, whatever you want to do. That was very scary, to be honest. It was fun, but it was like, this is a big deal to be drawing, Batman, and I know I can do, he's telling me I can do anything I want to, but that makes me kind of nervous because, you don't often get the chance to draw, or I don't often get the chance to draw Batman. So it was cool, though. I would love to do, if I had more openings in my schedule, as soon as I have some more openings in my schedule, my plan is to try to hit them up on that, and then also maybe Batman Black and White, because that book was in the early planning stages when I started getting hammered on my schedule and everything, and my convention deadlines and stuff.
Those are both books that I really enjoy because of the fact that they're not directly in continuity. You can play around with any kind of Batman you want to, and you get stories that are really driven by the Batman that you're working with depends on the story that's being told, how old he is, where it takes place. It's interesting for us as readers to know that creators have a little bit more freedom to tell those kind of stories because of it, and I think we get a payoff because it's a nice break. I love the in-continuity Batman. I'm a Batman guy. That's my character. I love reading him. But this kind of stuff is nice for me because I love any kind of Batman story. I love revisiting past Batmans. I love seeing different takes on the current Batman. I love that the focus was seeing Batman through, kind of be introspective because of the way he's viewing this kid, and everything that's going on with him. And this kid's got this sob story going on. And I got to be honest with you, he tricked me. Because I thought he was like this, he's this down-and-out, unlucky kid who obviously goofing up his life with his choices. But I really believe that he was on the path to the straight and narrow earlier on in the issue than he actually was. I think the story wraps up with a really nice, happy ending. But when we were getting there partway through, I wanted to smack him upside the head because he fooled me. He fooled me the way he did, well, I should say, he fooled me the way he thought he did Batman. I like that Batman felt like he was a little bit ahead of me in the story, because those actually are my favorite Batman stories, where it's like, Batman knew more than I did. And it made sense that Batman knew more than I did, because, he saw clues to this kid that I didn't see. And I liked that about the story. I liked that it was really focused on the kid. Batman was kind of, I don't want to say a background character, because he was clearly, the driving buddy with this kid, and we got to learn more about the kid through his conversation with Batman. But I like that our focus was on this kid, And there was something about that in a Batman story that always works really well for me when it's told that way.
Yeah. I think that there's actually, I mean, even though it's clearly removed from being it's not like he's a surrogate for being Robin, but I think that Batman plays well as a darker toned character who is tough on, but also caring for a less grim, less developed, more uncertain type of character, That's why that dynamic, or it's part of the reason that dynamic works well.
I love the Batmobile design. You got to have some fun with that.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I did put that one together. I actually created a 3D model for that based on, it was kind of a hodgepodge of 2 different Batmobiles or something, because I've done some, me and Kiki and one of my friends named Drew we've done some 3D model work for DC to use as inner office reference material for artists that are drawing stuff in the Batman world. And so I took a couple of Batmobiles that I've done for those and combine them together to give a different take on a Batmobile.
See, and I like that because to me, Batman is always tinkering with the Batmobile. That's like he's trying to make it better, trying to make it more effective. So and I guess it's always been the way in my head that I've justified the fact that he's had different vehicles throughout the years. It's been an evolution of design to try and make the perfect crime, which with technology constantly changing, you never make the perfect one. He can't be complacent with that. He's got to constantly be reevaluating the design of the vehicle, his ride. And it's cool to see new versions of it. To me, that's the advantage of the money he's working with, that he can afford to keep doing things that we could never do this.
Yeah, I mean, it would be awesome to tinker with my own car in that way. Not that I have the time or mechanical abilities, but just the idea of customizing it, like making it hyper super custom and money being really no object. That'd be pretty sweet.
I liked your Damian. I like your take on him, because I love Damian as a character, mainly because he's not Tim. And I mean, I love Tim, but he doesn't feel like a Tim clone. And I think if you're going to do a new Robin, you want, when they did Damian, you want somebody that doesn't feel like a second-rate version of the character that came before him in that role, because Tim had such a definitive style to him on every level that the take on Damian was really good in this one.
Yeah.
That's about I guess I drew Damian once, for like a standalone issue back before the New 52. But basically, this is the first time that I got to draw Damian. I felt like this was the first time I got to draw the New 52 version of him, even though there's not a lot of difference other than like commissions and that sort of thing. So it was fun to do that and to make it clearly different than my normal version of Robin, how I would normally think of Tim Drake Robin. So difference in the body language and the attitude.
I love the whole cat thing, because it was like later on I'm like, wait, Damian put that cat there on purpose to rattle those guys. They're playing on that whole villains are superstitious, cowardly lot thing.
Yeah.
If we throw this in there and they're playing with this kid that already is blatantly unlucky, these guys are going to be like, wait a minute, this kid's history, and now we got a cat walking over our path, black cat walking over our path. We're out of here. I thought it was really a cool story, because again, it didn't go too far, and it led to that moment that we all wanted to see with Penguin.
And it was Selina's cat.
Yeah.
But I liked seeing the little the cat carrier on the back of the bike, and even the scene before that, where we're seeing just Damian and the cat standing right there. You look at the bike, you can still see it on the bike. And that's just a background piece there, but you put the cat carrier on the back there. I was like, oh, cool, because I always like looking at your backgrounds for stuff like that, for the little attention to detail.
Oh, thanks. You're the one I'm drawing them for. No, it's like, but I mean that the general you, like the people who actually care about the immersive sort of backgrounds or something like that, because backgrounds take a lot of effort to draw, and it's hard sometimes to stay motivated to keep up the detail or something. So anyway,
backgrounds are great on the iPad, because with the ability to pinch out and zoom in.
Oh, yeah, that would make sense.
I mean, it's, for me, I find more and more often now that when I'll read a page, if I don't do it when I'm doing my initial read-through, when I go back through again and just look at the art, that's when I start zooming in and really just appreciating the fine attention to detail. Because sometimes it's like a movie that you like watch through the first time and just kind of enjoy the experience. It's my second viewing of the film that I really get analytical of it when I kind of want to go through and look for little tiny details and pieces that I missed. I kind of view comics the same way. When I go through the second time, I'm going through slower and being more meticulous. And that's when I notice things like the shadow of the cat and, little fine details like that. Even, the instrument panel in the car and the seats and, just like little details. I look at that kind of stuff. I get into it. Because that's the immersion where, like, the Batmobile, you look at the cushy seats and, like, that's got to be an awesome ride to be sitting in. It's like, and I'm, like, sitting here like I'm actually paying attention to seats in a car in a comic. But it's because it's the Batmobile, and we want to be in that ride. Panels lit up all around the door and stuff like that. It should look like a vehicle that is absolutely top of the line and has bells and whistles that would make sense for it. There's something cool about that.
That's the kind of stuff that not just me, I'm sure many other artists are thinking about, but you're drawing these things for hours and hours, so you need some sort of a rhyme or reason. I recently saw like Greg Capullo. I recently became friends with him on Facebook and was looking at some of his artwork and saw some of his pencil work that showed like an interior of Batman and the Batmobile, and was looking at some of the details of it and thinking, I should have done some of this too. I should have added some of these things too. Cool, like transparent, or I guess it would be translucent because you can't really tell, but like hovering panels, sort of things that he would like for buttons and stuff like that. Pretty cool stuff.
I gotta say, I like the bat cuffs.
Yeah.
The handcuffs that are shaped in the bat symbol.
Oh, that's fine. I think I'm pretty sure Tim had requested those specifically. Like, I could be wrong. I'd have to look at the script again. It's been months, so I can't remember off the top of my head. There's a detail on the first page, third panel, I think. So it'd be the top right hand panel that ended up getting missed, I think, in the coloring. Are you guys looking at the artwork right now? Like, are you looking at the comics?
I've got the first page right in front of me.
Okay, tell me, because it wasn't like this on the web version. So is there a big bat-shaped shadow that's falling over 13 and the old woman in the third panel?
No.
Okay, yeah, that got left out for some reason. But that was supposed to be what cued him to look up, was that the big shadow falls over.
Now you have her finger pointing.
Sure.
And she's looking away, so I see that, but there is no bat-shaped shadow. Because the next panel that we see is him kicking him.
Kicking the crap out of him.
Yes, yeah.
With a nice crack.
Yeah, that was in the third panel. I had included in a separate layer the shape of Batman's. It was almost like it was a stylized shape, so it wasn't like the true shape of his cape. It was more like almost the bat signal was because in the second panel he's flying in front or swinging in front of the moon, so it almost makes sense that it would be the shape of a bat signal, whatever. But it got left out, and I didn't realize it until it was too late, basically.
I liked your penguin. Oh, well. Your penguin was awesome.
Oh, thanks. Thank you.
I'm a big fan of Oswald Cobblepot. This whole thing of superstition, with everyone saying that this kid is so unlucky and things like that, but you kept having Batman saying, I don't believe in luck. I believe, basically I believe you make your own path, your own destiny by the people you surround yourself with and the choices you make. And his whole thing about, he was basically telling the kid, hey, you're being lazy. You're trying to take the easy way out of things instead of trying to work hard and surround yourself with the right people and make good choices. That ending panel kind of where he's in the hospital, he's with that girl Dawn who he shot. the teller who he had a thing for. And Batman in the panel, there's sequences where sometimes you'll see Batman with a little smirk. And this kind of took me back to some of my favorite stories growing up are where sometimes the hero in the story, the book is about, isn't the main character. It's the other person you're following. In this case, with 13, he was the main character. That kid was the main character we were following in the story.
Right.
And Batman was kind of like the narrator, kind of like Phantom Stranger would be or something like that in the story. So when you see him looking in the window like that, it was kind of like him as our narrator in the story, our guide, kind of like doing kind of the wink and the nod to the situation, but also to us as the reader. I really liked that. There was something about that in the story because seeing this journey with the kid, it was appropriate for a done-in-one. I don't know. I really, anytime you get to see Batman smiling and it makes sense because it's so rare. I really like seeing that.
Yeah, it's rare in a in a story like that because earlier on, He kicked he kicked that kid so hard in his stomach, in his solar plexus or whatever. So yeah, I mean the tone of the character. It's important that I have never written any long stories. I've written some short stories and stuff, but it would be for me it would be difficult to write a character like Batman that does he take himself seriously that he should not always take himself seriously, like to himself. He should know his own rounded personality, that he's not just a one note individual. He introduces theatricality into his, like, a stage persona of Batman for the terror and the unease that it brings to villains and that sort of thing. But he shouldn't be like that 100% of the time, so he could afford to smile because he's still a human, and it's kind of they did just play a joke on this guy, but it's going to turn out in a way that hopefully will shape his life towards the better, so he can afford a grin to himself and not take himself too seriously all the time.
Am I the only one who just kind of thought beyond the page, just wondering that there's going to be that conversation between Dawn and Trey? You know, assuming they get together, they start hanging out, they start dating. There's going to have to be one day be that conversation where he says, "Oh, by the way, I'm the guy that shot you." Just trying to figure out how the heck do you tell her, because you figure it's not going to be a first date conversation. He's going to wait a couple dates. He's going to wait for her to get to know the real guy.
Wait, a couple dates? You're going to wait like a few years. Listen, I'm the first one to say in a relationship, I'm all for honesty, but if 2 or 3 dates in, he's telling the girl, "By the way, I just want to let you know I shot you once," it's over. I wouldn't advise him to tell her.
Yeah, that might be the kind of thing you might not ever tell. That's like your deep, dark secret.
I'd say put the old life behind you and just, like, make a vow to yourself from this point forward you're always going to be honest with her. But maybe that's one event you need to just kind of say, you know what, the old me is kind of dead. She's going to get to know new me.
I guess if it ever came out, since they live in a world of, like, superpowered craziness, he could always say that he was under the influence of some alien control or something like that, and with as often as it tends to happen, like mass populaces get to see alien invasions all the time and whatever else, he could just be like, yeah, it was like some sort of alien thing, I think. Like, I was under the influence of that stuff. Of course.
The problem is, like, a secret like that is like a relationship kiss of death.
Yeah.
Because, like, he's got 2 choices there. He can either go the gym route, and there's a point to that, to eventually come clean and just say, hey, look, this is what happened, and trying to find a tactful way to sneak that in and hope that she'll understand that he was in a dark phase of his life. But you really want to establish that you're no longer in that phase if you want that relationship to go anywhere.
Yeah, see, that's my problem. I think I probably would have been like a 2, maybe 3 date guy. So I gotta learn. I gotta learn what the proper date protocol is. Okay, I got it.
Well, even in this day and age, even in this universe, you always claim aliens. Aliens took over my body, and they buy it. That is the catch-all answer.
Now that only works in the comic book universe. It doesn't work. I shouldn't try that in the real world, right?
No, you've got it backwards. I'm telling you, it works in the real world too, is what I'm saying.
Cool.
I'm saying that's the universal, no matter who you tell that to, they immediately go, oh, gotcha. And then you're off the hook, I drove off without paying for my gas because, alien intervention or alien influence.
I proposed to my wife blaming anything I've ever done wrong in the past on aliens, so it's like... Thing is, I think she still believes it's true. Or she thinks I'm an alien. I don't know. I'm not entirely sure she's wrong there.
Yeah.
See, I've often tried blaming it on the rain.
Oh.
I could have sang that line. I could have sang it else.
Or you could have lip synced it. It wouldn't.
At least I was being nice. I just said it. I didn't sing it.
Wow.
And for our younger listeners, that was a song line.
Yeah, that was by
Milli Vanilli.
Vanilli.
Yeah. Yes.
And if you're not sure who that is, there were these two guys who were, I'm not sure their names, but they must have been seen as, hey, these are trendy looking, attractive guys, and they can't really sing that well. Actually, one of them ended up trying to have a music career later on after he got busted for all this, but I'm not sure how well it went. And decided to, the producers or whatever, decided to have them lip sync all of their stuff. So for a few years, they topped the charts. This would have been in the 80s, I guess, where they topped the charts with a couple of songs, including Blame It on the Rain, but they were not the singers. And there was a very public sort of humiliation to them when, like, the record they had that they were lip syncing to started skipping, and it's really hard to act like you're skipping the way you're singing your vocals, of course. And then that led to additional investigating by whomever cares about those things, and they got outed as just lip syncers. So their careers got severely hampered by that. So that was a big deal though, at the time. It was a pretty big...
Okay, I remember. Yeah. Like, oh my God. And I didn't really care because I didn't like their music, but because they even won Grammys. People were like, oh, he must give back the Grammy and this and that. I'm like, okay, yeah, fine. They still made millions off of you people.
Yeah, I wonder what happened with all that. I mean, I heard later on that that one of the guys tried to have another singing career, like a legit one, and then that, of course, I'm assuming that they were, I think I remember hearing that they got really, of course, they were really depressed or something, because you would get made fun of mercilessly, I'm assuming, for that.
Well, the one died.
Yeah.
One of them died? Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And then that's when the solo career for the other one, the surviving one, it actually was 2011. He released a single Anytime on iTunes in April of 2011. Mm-hmm. They tried to do a comeback where the two of them initially, they were singing. They tried to make a comeback as, I guess, Milli Vanilli, but the really them singing. And that didn't work out. Then the other guy tried to do a solo career. It's funny how nowadays, like, how acceptable lip syncing has become at performances. These two guys were just, like, bombarded for it.
Yeah, I mean, like, I know that there was a while back where there was some sort of a big deal whenever Ashley Simpson had been caught lip syncing on Saturday Night Live or something like that.
Right.
I don't really even keep up with this kind of stuff. This is something... whatever. So I don't know if I remember all the details correctly. But at the time, she said, and then later on it was confirmed by some other singing professional, singers, oftentimes, even if they don't fully lip sync, if they're doing a performance that in an area that they're not sure about the acoustics, they might have their own vocals kind of as backup to reinforce theirs, especially if they're doing a dance number or something. I don't think she was doing a dance number, whatever. But the point is that it's much more acceptable now that, sometimes people do a lip syncing number, but usually I think that it's when they're doing dancing and stuff like that where they're going to be winded and not going to give the best singing performance.
Well, I guess there was a group that spun out of it that was called the Real Milli Vanilli, when it was the actual singers who were Milli Vanilli. Oh. But I guess they had all kinds of issues because they all tried to release, like, things around the same time. And it was, in many ways, they kind of kept the wound fresh instead of, like, they probably should have just, like, stepped out of the limelight for, like, a while and not kept trying to put in all these other projects.
Here's an idea. They should have had the guys who did the singing the first time. They should have had them be the front people, and then the front people do the back, do the lip, do their actual singing, and then they could have just switched places. That would have been a fair exchange.
Too funny. Only on this show we start going onto a Milli Vanilli tangent.
I honestly didn't think it would go that wide of a conversation.
Apparently,
so now that we've talked about it that much, that means that you have to sing that part, right? I mean, we've built it up so much to all the listeners that you probably really need to sing that. I'm just joking. You don't have to sing.
Blame it on the rain that was falling. Blame it on the stars that shined at night. Whatever you do, don't put the blame on you. Blame it on the rain.
I don't, like, you know what really is disturbing to me? You actually know the words.
And that was pretty good too. That was decent. That was decent for being put on the spot, and you knew all the lyrics and did a pretty good job singing that. Good job.
And I was dancing while singing. So you can dance and sing at the same time.
Oh, I hope that's true.
Wow.
Oh, the scary part is it is.
You what?
It is. I was dancing.
God, I wish this was a video podcast. If anyone wants to Photoshop Jim's head dancing, like, and make it like an animated GIF, go right ahead, because I'll be glad to put it on one of our episodes. Or on the website, like make it the permanent banner or something.
Oh,
wow.
Man. Well done.
Guys, is there anything else you want to get to that we haven't talked about? Freddie, is there anything upcoming that you want to discuss? Or, shout out websites or, Freddie, obviously FreddieArt.com.
Yeah, FreddieArt.com, thank you very much. That's my website. It has a link to my Facebook and Twitter. I regularly post behind this, like work in progress sort of pictures on my Twitter of commissions that I'm working on, or sometimes actual comic book pages when I'm allowed to show them. That's about it. I mean, project-wise, I've done some covers that I'm excited about. Like I'm doing 2 G.I. Joe covers. I'm not even sure for what issues. I've already completed one, and then the second one's due in like a week and a half. And then I did a Ninja Turtles cover, which was a really big deal for me because I love the Ninja Turtles. And I think we might have even talked about that on the last podcast, because I was talking about it all the way back then, like us, me trying to set it up and trying to figure out when it would fit into the continuity of the series. And it was issue 24. It was a dealer's incentive cover that finally came out. And what else? Oh, some more covers. I did some covers for a book called Captain Midnight for Dark Horse, and then also the way that I'm working on that is I'm doing like the pencil drawings, the structure drawings. And then my good friend Dan Scott, who usually does Magic the Gathering artwork, he's doing like digital painted work on top of it. And he and I have been really good friends for 10 or 15 years, something like that. And we used to work at Hallmark together. We go back a while, so we've been looking for something to work on together. And so this is really cool. So that's the Sky. There's some Captain Midnight covers, and then also there's a new series coming out called Skyman for Dark Horse. That's the same thing for a couple of those covers. So that's about it.
One of the things I really like about following your Facebook page, Twitter, and FreddieArt.com, that's where I find out things like that you're going to be on Dark Horse Presents. That's where I find out, projects that you're going to be doing for DC. Things like your Legends of the Dark Knight story. Anything that you're doing is there. And then cover work, because I'm a big fan of what you do with social media. I love that you share your convention commissions and things like that, because I love seeing you do different takes on different characters, and it's always fun for me to have that experience. I feel like you really enjoy connecting with your fans, and it's infectious. I don't know, for me it's kind of, as a fan growing up, you always had those dreams about the comic bullpens and how cool it'd be to be there and see people at work and stuff like that. And you really embrace like using social media as that way to kind of give your fans like an inside look at that. And I find that really engaging. I appreciate what you do with social media, because it just kind of, it's always great to like click on your page and see like what's up there new. And you also post things like you put up a piece of Arthur Adams' work, and we're talking about how much you really enjoy his artwork, and we're geeking out. And I have fun with that kind of stuff as well, which I think is just kind of a cool part with social media. Your kind of chance to, hey, this is something that's important to me. And, obviously it's one of your influences, and it's just kind of cool to connect with you on that level as well. So I don't know, it's just something really cool that you do, and I appreciate as a fan of yours.
Oh, thank you. And like just now you had mentioned the Marvel bullpen stuff, although it's not exactly the same thing. I've recently had some conversations with some ex-Wildstormers. Man, I feel like I missed out on not having a chance to work in the studio there and stuff, because, I'm positive. I know that it wasn't all great, all wonderful stories, because it's just like any other workplace. There's going to be tensions, or there's going to be long hours, and just whatever. It's not all lollipop land, but it's just hearing like I was sitting next to Eddie Nunez at San Diego Con. I've gotten to know Richard Friend and have known Joel Gomez. He was a staff penciler at Wildstorm for a few years. So the combination of all three of them, I've gotten nice stories from each of them and stuff. And just seemed, I don't know, it just feeds right into that. It's the same thing with the Marvel Bullpen. It's just the idea of all these awesome artists under one roof, chit-chatting and talking about funny stories. It's just that inner circle thing that it's a really cool idea, and probably even cooler when it's happening. So that's another thing that I'm a big fan of that I can share with people. I'm sure a lot of other people are that same way. People who are comic fans wish that they could get be a fly on the wall just to hear the cool stories and stuff.
Yeah, that's. I think it's one of the reasons why I like so many documentaries that come out about comics. Yeah, and film, and I think all of pop culture, it works that way. It's kind of fun just to know what that was. And I think for that moment, it's the same sense of disbelief you get when you read the comic. You feel like you're a part of something that you weren't a part of, but like you're given a window into that and you get to enjoy it. I think I dig that stuff. I think that's really cool.
Me too.
Guys, anything else you want to share or shout out?
Nope, not for me. I don't think so.
Jim?
No, I'm good.
All right. Freddie, as always, you are... I was laughing at the time, like, we're over 3 hours again. And we never... The funny part is we've never, like, any time we've ever sat and recorded together, we've never, like, planned this. It's just kind of happens.
It's just natural. I mean, it's natural conversation and stuff. I enjoy hanging out with you guys. Like, this is socializing to me. It's fun to hang out with you guys and talk about cool stuff.
I think that translates to our listening audience as well, though. It's a chance for all of us to hang out together. And that's one of the things that I like about podcasting is just kind of the ability to share this kind of experience with an audience. You're always so willing to give of your time, especially when you've got deadlines and things going on, that we really appreciate and enjoy your company and the insight into the great work that you're doing. So thanks, as always, for being a friend of the show and for coming on the show.
Thank you. I appreciate it, and we'll have to do it again much sooner than a year from now.
Oh, absolutely. Let's definitely plan on that.
Great.
Great molecules! They're programming the computers for a chain reaction to blow up that atomic pile!
I want to thank everyone for their patience this week. We had some outages, and I want to remind everyone about our show website, ragingbullets.com. Anytime there's a need to post show updates, I always go straight to ragingbullets.com. I try to keep everyone who's in the listening audience in the loop on what's going on. I also want to take this time to thank Freddie E. Williams II for once again joining us on the show. He's an amazing guest, and I hope you guys enjoy this as much as we did recording it. Reminder about our show voicemail line. It's 1-440-388-4434 or Dr. Norge on Skype. Listener voicemails will be back on our next episode, and we love having you guys a part of the show, so please feel free to call in with anything. Remember that we are on all social media, whether it's Twitter or Facebook or Google+. We have a Raging Bullets representation there. You can find all that information in the show notes or also on our website. Plus, we have a wonderful Facebook group. It's a community that's grown well beyond the show, and it's just somewhere that I enjoy being. There's constant great news and updates on what's going on in the world of comics and pop culture. It's a terrific community of people, and I'm just really proud to be a part of it. So I want to thank everyone who posts there regularly, because you've really turned that into something special, and it really is on the amazing community of people that are there. So that's something I just wanted to shout out real quick. Sponsoring us this episode, once again, is DCBService.com. DCBService.com is where you can pick up The Movement, issue number 8. It's regularly $2.99, 40% off only $1.79. I also want to remind you really quick that they are also at DCBService.com a digital partner. What that means, if you have a Comixology account, a Diamond Digital iVerse Media account, or a My Digital Comics account, you can link those accounts to your DCB Service account, and you get 5% of any of those purchases towards your DCB Service orders. It doesn't cost you anything more to do it. It supports a show sponsor. It's just a great way to link your accounts and get something as a special bonus for it. So that's DCBService.com. Over at InStockTrades.com. Remember, this is where you can pick up Dark Horse Presents issues 23, 24, and 25 at 45% off for only $4.39 each. These are amazing anthology titles, and please make sure to click on them and take a look at all the amazing stories that are available there, including Brain Boy, featuring the artwork of Freddie E. Williams II. Remember that they have constant deals going on over at InStockTrades.com, and orders of $50 or more give you free shipping. We appreciate both of those sites for being show sponsors. Our next episode, Jim and I are going to be jumping back into Forever Evil and also just taking this time to chat about some of the amazing comics that we have been reading over the past few weeks. So if you have anything that you would like to shout out, please feel free to call into our show voicemail line. We'd love to have your thoughts on the show. We'll be recording that really soon, actually, because of the fact that we were running a little late on this episode. And I want to thank you again, as I mentioned at the beginning, for your patience. We will see you next week.
Bye.
Flying through space and time, 1,000 different lifetimes. Faded for love and flaws and incredibly clear sightlines. Swinging your mace around, such a practical outlook. Helping the JSA and occasionally supporting your own book. Hawkman, Hawkman. Eagle eyes can't see. Hawkman, your plan. And what you do to me. Hawkman. Villains are closing in, be they Thanin Guard or Egyptian. Working so hard to thwart you and Hawkgirl's mission. The odds are not on your side, and danger seems to stack up.